moment after 5 p.m., and we are coming live, the Select Board meeting for Orleans from the Nauset Room in Town Hall. If you would like to phone in at any time tonight, the number is 646-558-8656. And we're going to get right on with the meeting. I want to introduce our vice chair, Michael Herman, and past chairs, Mark Matheson, Meth Runyon, and for the town, John Kelly, joining us by Zoom. And we will get started. Public comment is the first thing on the agenda. We're looking at a 3-minute max time for public comment. Is anybody here for public comment? Anybody on Zoom for public comment, Peggy?
No hands raised.
Okay, closing public comment and moving right on. We have some minutes to review and approve. Anybody want to get us rolling?
Kevin's here.
Just
Okay.
1 second.
Okay. It is on page, I didn't write down the page number. That's funny. Oh, yeah. Hey, the motion is on page 3.
You want to wait for Kevin?
No,
Just so he can vote?
it's just minutes.
Okay.
So first up are the minutes of August 3rd, 2022.
I'm not showing.
Madam Chair, I would move that we vote to approve the minutes of August 3rd, 2022.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Second.
And I do have one request. It says in the minutes on page 1, a rep from Del Mar. That rep is Luke Chapman, who's an active member of our community, and his name could be inserted. That would be fantastic. Anybody else have any notes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Let's keep moving.
Madam Chair, I would vote to approve the minutes of August 10th, 2022. I think the only change I have, well, I'll get a second.
Second.
Is Gail Myers-Lavin. Her last name is not on that. So if
Same kind of issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we want people. Any other thoughts on those minutes? Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. 500, John. Oh, and I just want to commend Jennifer for the brevity and how she synthesized information on all of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I would vote to approve the minutes of August 12th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Changes, corrections, anything? All those in favor?
Aye.
Very short minutes.
Madam Chair, I would vote to approve the minutes of August 24th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Discussions, changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. August 26th, please.
Madam Chair, I would vote to approve the minutes of August 26th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion, changes? Again, thank you to Jennifer. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Madam Chair, I would vote to approve the minutes of August 31st, 2022.
Second.
discussion, edits? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jennifer. John, welcome to the podium. You are up, sir. And that's, I believe, page 26 in our packets.
You ready?
Are we ready? Yes.
Okay. I'm John Fuller. I'm the Orleans delegate to the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates, and I have a brief report on what I've observed over the last 3 months. First of all, the director of the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center reported that there are low-interest loans that are available to help with the remediation of failed wastewater systems for those who qualify. And secondly, funds should be available soon to assist with new sewer system hookups. No specifics at this time, but the town should query that office to get more details. And when we are back in session, I will ask more about that. The county is continuing to fund the county sheriff's pension obligations. The county commissioners are requesting approval of $12.8 million for the county ARPA projects, including but not limited to county health department improvements, regionally shared housing services, the Cape Cod Commission, and the county dredge. That particular issue is still at the Assembly Finance Committee. The county has approximately $26 million in unreserved funds. It has been suggested to move $8.5 million towards the OPEB obligation of the county. It was briefly discussed, but it's gone back to the Assembly Finance Committee for further review. Should be a vote next week.
John, can we ask questions as you go, or would you prefer questions at the end?
Say again?
Would you prefer questions
Any way you
at
wanna
the
do it.
end or as we go?
As we go is fine.
If there is a whole transfer of funds to the whole pot of county obligation, does that reduce any particular town obligation?
No. It's just the county's employees.
Oh, county employees
portion,
only.
right.
Okay, great.
Their portion right now is about 36 million. But they, as far as I can determine, they put very little towards it.
Wow.
And if they put 8.5 million in there, that would be a significant deposit. And I'm still trying to determine exactly what the county's bond rating is, but they haven't borrowed any money for a while, so I don't know what it is.
Wow, interesting.
I'm working on that.
Thank you.
John, could I just go back to number 3, and when you talked about the regionally shared housing services, what are those?
I can't answer that question at this time. That will come up when we finally discuss the 12.8 million, and they will give me a breakdown of all the projects that the county's planning on doing. But I don't have specifics on each one at this time.
Great.
Okay, representation to participate with the developing task force concerning the replacement of the canal bridges consisting of Mass DOP, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Cape Cod Commission, the Association for the Preservation of Cape Cod, and the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. That group is developing, and the Assembly will discuss very soon becoming a partner in that grouping, because I certainly think the county has a lot to do with who comes over the bridge and how fast. Has the town received any communication on the special legislation to ban fertilizer yet?
John, do you want to answer that because of the process? We still have to sign the letter. right?
So with the process, John, the board is scheduled to vote their first meeting in January to file the request that the legislators file our home rule petition to prohibit
This session.
the application of fertilizer. But you can't file that till the start of the new session, which will be in January.
Right, okay. I will tell you that the Provincetown delegate and somewhat the Harwich delegate is particularly interested in this because Provincetown is in full support. Harwich Board of Health is talking about it. And we did vote, as you know, to support your petition, if you will. And that passed at the Assembly, but that's up for board discussion about the whole county putting in some kind of thing, because that certainly affects the whole county also. And I've sort of been appointed to be the pusher on that, so since I brought it up, if you volunteer for something, it becomes yours.
I know.
So I think that's where that stands right now. And we will not discuss it again until the next session in January anyway, so with that information, it works out very well. The Assembly is also considering looking at the new state Title V regulations in the very near future to see how they affect different towns. And we'll wait to see what happens with that. And lastly, I plan to attend the upcoming MMA convention, so I can get what insight I can on different issues, so I can bring those back to the Assembly. And I will say my first 6 months or so on the Assembly has been enlightening at best, and trying to fit in. And being one that was brand new and was bringing things up, sort of took a few of the lifers there by surprise. And that's my report for right now. Any other questions?
John, I have to say for all of us that we really appreciate you coming physically to report. That sets a new benchmark, I think.
Well, I will also tell you, I haven't missed a meeting. I do not tune in to the committee meetings because they're in the middle of the day, and at this time in my business career, I cannot do stuff in the middle of the day. But I do read the minutes, although they don't call them minutes, they call them something else there, and to try to keep up to date on that. But the Finance Committee is very active.
I do have a question. Does anybody else like to?
I'm good.
John, does the county have a history of getting involved or actively supporting the watershed permitting projects? You said that they're going to discuss the new state Title V regulations.
Haven't got that far yet.
Okay.
I will tell you that I discovered that we are the legislative body for the county, so anything, any budget materials or any request for funds by the commissioners has to be approved by us.
Great. Well,
And,
thank
any
you
other
for your
questions?
appearance.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's excellent.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Lost Dog, are you ready? The next item is to consider change of manager request. So, John, anything you want to chime in about?
So this, on page 30 of your packet, we have received an application for the Lost Dog Pub, would like to have a change of manager. And so my recommendation is that you would vote to approve it under motion 1.
Right. And anything you guys want to say?
Yeah, I'm Andy Murphy. I'm the president of the Lost Dog, Hurricane Hugo Inc., which is our business in Orleans. And Alex Jolly is our manager. Who I think we've had a great year. I think we got a bright future. Alex does a great job here. So I just encourage anybody watching or all you folks to stop in if you haven't been in a while. All right.
Well, Madam Chair, I would vote to approve Mr. Murphy's request for change of manager from John J. Hilly to Alexander Jolly for the annual all-alcohol beverage common victualler license held by Hurricane Hugo, Inc., DBA Lost Dog Pub, located at 63 Route 6A, Orleans. Approval is subject to all local and state permits, licenses, and approvals, laws and bylaws, and in accordance with the Town of Orleans rules and regulations of the Liquor Licensing Authority adopted December 21st, 1994. Last updated June 10th, 2015, in Massachusetts General Law 138, and will become final after approval from the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
very
you for
much.
coming in.
Thank you.
Okay. We need to transfer affordable housing rental unit at Old Tote Road to the new owners of that building. John, any comments?
So you have in your packet, and this is pretty standard, we've had these before, the existing property at Old Tote Road is being sold, and it has a deed-restricted affordable housing unit, and we want to make sure that that is transferred appropriately, so the state requires that the town sign off on the certification for the notification of the assignment. We have reviewed it, everything is in order, and my recommendation is that you would vote to authorize the chair to sign that this evening, so that it can schedule the closing and have this take place.
Madam Chair, I would move to authorize the chair to sign the notice of assignment for the property located at 14 Old Tote Road.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. 500, we want to keep every affordable unit we have. Let me make sure, I'm going to take a second to sign this so I don't lose track of it. And John, I will leave the folder in the door with the other signatures we'll need tonight.
Yes, and Molly will pick them up in the morning.
Right. Okay. We're moving here. The next item is the charge, I believe. Great. And I think we're going to hear some discussion about this. John, anything you want to say about the charge before we dive into it?
Well, I think it's been expanded a little bit. Like, there's some additional language that's been added since the board originally approved it. It's not highlighted, so I think I think some of that has to do with just adding additional information in there about the ex officios and I think some of the items at the end. But the gist of this is pretty much what it's been for a number of years. It was originally approved probably almost 6 years ago, and just over 6 years ago, and we didn't have interest in it. We never had enough candidates to put it in play. The goal here is to go beyond a 5-year capital improvement plan and have a schedule, if you will, that starts to identify projects 15 to 20 years out. That avoids the surprise. It avoids some of the dilemmas we get into. But I think along with that, the goal is to establish criteria that can rank projects that will then be relied on in terms of when the scheduling is, as opposed to the squeaky wheel, which sometimes is the way our capital projects go forward. So I think this is something the board has wanted to see. It's back in front of you tonight, so if you vote to approve it, then the board can go about issuing the charge and beginning to interview candidates and get the committee up and running.
Great. And just for clarification, the reason in town we typically use advisory boards is to set priorities as opposed to having staff set priorities? Do you have any, I mean, why wouldn't we put a staff person in charge of this? I'm just devil's advocate.
There's two things. Under the charter, it's the town administrator who prepares the 5-year capital improvements plan. So you have to work within the existing structure of the charter. But there's nothing in the charter regarding a long-range plan that would go out 15 to 20 years. So I think having the town administrator and the finance director on that with an ex officio member from the FinCom, the goal is to start to build that longer-range plan and do it in a manner that is consistent with the charter and complementary to the process that already has to take place.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Let's get into some discussion because I know some of us have edits. Anything?
Well, that's what you just brought up. I mean, I think this is excellent, and I'm excited we're going to hopefully put this together. I do feel, though, it needs to be led or overseen by our Director of Finance if it's going to have an impact on the long term. If they're handling the 5-year plan, anything adding to that, whether it's 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 10 to 20, if it's not kind of directed and overseen by our town staff, which we like the idea of that because in the charter it is for the 5-year already. So why aren't we taking that same philosophy and extending it through to when we're looking at long-term planning? Does that make sense?
That's an open question for us as we deliberate.
We've decided it was prudent to do for the 5 years. If we're extending this now to 20, I think we should follow that same philosophy and practical prudence.
Are you talking about a change to the charter eventually, Michael?
I don't know if you need to change the charter, or maybe that can eventually happen, but this is in front of us now. I wouldn't want to wait until we possibly made a charter change in a year from now, until it took effect, to go forward with this. I'd love to go forward with this as soon as possible.
So you see that the directors, the manager and the director of finance are sitting on the committee?
They're sitting on the
Yeah.
committee. Right.
So
but-
it's just an advisory committee?
Understood,
Right.
but that's where I want this to be a little bit more than advisory committee, and that it actually moves into the planning of the town's finances.
So they will be making a report before January 15th each year?
Yes?
Okay. All right. Anything else? Matt?
And I also support this. I think we've been kind of talking about this for a pretty long time, and I think some promises have been made to do this. So I just have, I guess the main thing that I'm trying to do with the wording of this charge is make sure that we're clear about how it is that priorities get decided or set. And I do think that this committee is the place for recommendations to come from, but the priorities should be something that the select board is the final say on. But, so, the only two edits that I put in here, I'll start with the kind of the easy one in paragraph 5, where it says, project extending out at least 10 to 15 years beyond the 5th year of the capital improvement plans. I would make this clearer and just cross off at least 10, and just stick with the 15 years, which also is the period that's mentioned in the final paragraph. And it just makes it, I think when you say things like 10 to 15 years, I think you're better off picking a time period and using that. If 15 years beyond the CIP turns out to be too long,
Yes.
you can always just put unknowns in years like that. But I think that would be a better framework to define their work.
So you would prefer to make the threshold longer and
Did
not
the 15
shorter?
years, the 15 years beyond the fifth year. So it's a 20-year look forward.
So, but the language right now says at least 20 years. So if we have something that's between 5 and 20 years, like a new school building,
Where's the 20?
where would
Yeah,
that
doesn't say
fall?
I don't see a 20. Where is?
Because it's in addition to the 5 on the CIP.
I think you mean at least 10.
Sorry, yes, but what I'm saying is if we change it to 15, at least 15, then the things that are shorter, under 15, but more than 5, how do we get to them?
Oh, no, this is, as I read this is, we have an uninterrupted continuum of the 5 years of the CIP, and then the 15 years of this are
Or is what we're covering?
consecutive, yes, right.
So if it's beyond 15,
If it's beyond
we're not
20,
considering it. If it's beyond 20, we're not considering it.
Not in this.
Not this, right. So how would you word that? Because clearly, I'm interpreting it differently than you are, and so it's not, can you wordsmith it for me?
the way I did it here was just cross off at least 10, those words, so that it just says project extending out to 15 years beyond the fifth year of the capital improvements plan.
How about, my problem is where it says at least 10 years, doesn't, that, sounds to me like our consideration starts with projects that are beyond that 10-year mark plus the 5. Can we say projects that extend out 10, and instead of have at least, or 15 years beyond the fifth year of the, so if we just take out at least, that brings the projects within the scope of the years?
Yeah, I think, but I'm just, saying things like 10 to 15
Yeah.
years in a charge, I think is
Leave it
a little
15.
bit
Yeah.
undefined, so,
So you want that 20-year threshold, including the CIP.
yeah.
Any help with the wordsmithing of that?
I understand it like
I
Matt
understand it.
does.
Okay.
If you just cross out that at least 10.
At least 10.
We're good.
Great. Okay. Everybody okay? John, you got that?
Yes.
Great.
If I can, Madam Chair,
Please.
I think all MEF is trying to say is, you frame this as, in strategic planning, the planning horizon.
Right.
I mean, that's
20
all
years.
this is doing.
Yeah, why don't we just say that? That's much cleaner. The planning horizon is
The
20.
planning horizon.
20 years,
is
including the CIP.
Including the CIP.
Yeah.
Expected to be 20
Yeah,
years.
let's taste it in a positive.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure it's inclusive, not
Okay.
exclusive. At least sounds exclusive to me. John, is that okay?
Okay.
Great.
So if I could just
Please,
carry
I've got
that
a
to
couple.
specific words.
Yeah.
So after where it says capital improvement plan, comma, would add, again, for those who want to come at it a different way, such that the planning horizon is a total of 20 years,
Perfect.
period.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you. Good. Other concerns?
Just one other, in the next paragraph, where it says, "The committee shall prioritize and time the implementation of each project into the long-range capital plan." And this gets back to my, who's setting priorities question. And without saying that this is the way it should end up being, I wrote, "The committee shall recommend
Yes.
priorities and timing for
Yes.
placing each project into the long-range capital plan."
I think that's perfect, Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, because, again, it's a select board, ultimately a select board choice that then gets in front of voters, right? Cool. Mark, did you have anything?
I just, following up on what Michael had brought up earlier on about the director of finance being involved in the town administrator, town manager being involved. Are we looking for those two, or one of those two, essentially acting as the chair with the 5 other appointed members in the ex officio, working with them? It doesn't really, I guess I'm looking at it, in the perspective of, between the town manager, but more specifically, the director of finance, having knowledge about, and we've talked about this before, of where things are in our spending for years out, and when certain things are paid off, whatever debt might be incurred, things are paid off, and more can be assumed, keeping the tax rate level, or the, what we've borrowed at a kind of steady state, whatever. And so, in terms of the long-range planning, I guess my expectation is that most people look at this in terms of finances for the town, not necessarily in terms of, do we need to replace a bulkhead, or do we need to replace a building? The concern is more about what's it going to cost us to do that. And so the priorities hinge on two components, so how do we make sure that both components are equally addressed and that one's not left out?
And to your point, we have some committees where the chair role is filled by staff, and others where it's not, and the committee is advisory only. So, yeah, Kevin?
Yeah, I actually,
Good point.
because I was actually hoping Michael had some insert language, but with Mark bringing this up, I know over the years, I've seen actually other community charges put right in it, who we expect to be the chair.
Well, could we say
Yeah, I think we should do
co-chaired
that.
by town
Right.
manager and finance director?
That's what
That make-
that's what I was trying to get to. But
And I
Thank
think,
you.
I think that's great wording, because I
Well, and
think,
this current CIP is directed by the
Town
town manager or administrator, right? So,
but I think by establishing the leadership, from the standpoint of Kathy runs the financial models, the financial plans, we know that. And this is just an extension of that. So I think, if, Mark, you're comfortable, I think adding that, and each who will act as co-chairs, just pop that in.
my only question is, anticipating that we have talked about that assistant town manager position, which is not done yet, or can we build this in such a way that we don't have to redo it? Do you?
Or the designee.
Yeah, well, that's what
that's-
I'm thinking.
do that
Just
with
make it
words.
as flexible as possible,
or the
so we don't have to
designee.
revisit it.
But we don't have assistant town manager in here at all.
We don't.
That's right. No, we don't. And so if it's the town manager or their designee, then that would get us home, I think.
And the director of finance.
Right.
Well, yeah, who's already there.
So there'll be co-chairs, and then you put, or their designees.
Yes. And we want to specify chairs on this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our comfort
Yes.
level is
Yeah,
there?
I'm fine with
Great.
that.
So-
I think it really shows support
Great.
to the committee as opposed to flailing out there.
That's right.
Yes.
And to spend time in an uninformed and non-productive way. Cool.
And do we need to take out the word
What?
town administrator and just have town manager? Because
Manager?
I think we voted in the charter, we've changed the title, so.
Right. It's just for the acting through the spring, I think. Meth, and I don't forget one I have.
The only thing I would want to add here is that it might be worthwhile thinking about describing the deliverable that we're expecting to
That's-
get out of this. And I'll just say, this is, just my opinion of what the deliverable is, that we're looking for a tool, a planning tool that is understandable to everybody. It's something that can be understood by all the voters and, easily and quickly, so that it's not something for accountants, it's not something for financial planners, it's
Yeah.
something for the average
Town resident.
town resident.
So 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the last paragraph where it talks about the report. Do you want to add some language to the formal report? It will be formally reported.
Could I offer something completely different?
Sure.
The very second sentence,
In the top?
right
or
in the top. I mean, when you basically say, we established them, we're not saying really why. What MEF is just saying is the why. We want them to produce a report that the average person on the street can understand.
I'm happy with that.
would be,
And it needs to blend into the CIP at some point, is what the last paragraph is saying.
right.
Okay. So go, you're on a roll. You want to,
I'm just,
we can't use,
I'm
could we
cutting
use
and
average
pasting.
Joe in
No.
the, I don't think so.
if you could repeat what you said, I think that would be the language. If, John, you're taking notes, would just be an added sentence. I mean,
I'm
you
going to have to watch the video, Kevin.
yeah,
Yeah, I think, because are we trying to get to a vote on this tonight? Is that the
Yes,
point? And
yes,
so-
we already have candidates who are waiting
Okay.
to want to join.
And so I would just say that the expectation
right.
is that the committee will produce a living and changing and evolving report that is understandable by the townspeople of Orleans, that is easily and quickly understandable by the townspeople of Orleans.
Good.
I have one question on it. Everybody else, okay? I would like that before the committee reports to the select board formally, that they have some form of public hearing to test their assumptions. Is that a reasonable, that they have a public meeting about their report? Because as you have lived with me, sometimes our assumptions, when heard in public, get roundly questioned and well criticized. So is that necessary?
Where's your insert, Madam Chair?
I would tie it to prior to the report. So where it says January 15th, where was that paragraph?
Very last paragraph.
Yeah.
So perhaps you'd say the Long Range Capital Planning Committee shall insert
Hold a public hearing prior to their,
after conducting a public hearing, comma, report to the select board.
yes, prior.
Does that
the
work?
Report to the select board, yes.
Recommendations to the
Right.
select board.
John, you got that one? That's an easy one. With just enough time to change their minds before they report to us, like we've had to do.
And Kathy,
Kathy, you want to
end up.
add to this?
Hi.
Muck?
Yes, I apologize for my video. Since the update, I cannot seem to get the video to work. But anyway, I had a question, and I was a little delayed in being able to attend this, so I'm not sure if I missed this or not. But did you indicate a time certain for that report? Is it in conjunction with the January 15th CIP?
Yes.
In November.
Okay, so did you put in January 15th as a time certain for the report, so we'd have to backdate the hearing, et cetera, et cetera?
Fourth paragraph, Kathy.
The fourth paragraph includes the 5-year CIP.
It says, in November each year, it will report.
1, 2, 3.
By January 15th.
Oh, I must have an old version.
Okay.
I have, my fourth paragraph says the committee shall assist the town administrator in the development of a 5-year capital improvement plan
Yeah.
for presentation to the select board and finance committee by January 15th.
So would you like,
Where is the long-range capital plan? Where's the date certain for that?
where would you, we're
Oh, I
open
see what
to
you're saying.
recommendation.
Yeah.
Well, is it supposed to be in conjunction? I mean, with the CIP?
Yes.
So
Yes.
shouldn't it be January 15th? We're only required to deliver that to you once a year also, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
good point.
So,
It does say in the last paragraph, at that time.
Right.
Also, at that time, it will formally report the long-range capital plan.
is that time, this is the discrepancy, you mean January 15th, or are we back to November?
Yeah,
So let's
So-
clear that up. Let's clear up those.
Because clearly, there's a lot of information, especially from a borrowing perspective,
right.
that does not get set until the springtime. So we usually, I'm just concerned about having that ready in November.
So Kathy, where would you like it? As you're the one that knows how we need to do this relative to those questions? Where does it make sense?
I would think it should be at least in conjunction with the CIP, so at least you should at least give us through January, especially since you're going to require us to have a hearing beforehand.
Yeah.
And John, typically, I mean, how early could we have a hearing? I mean, we're talking December, which is usually when we're directly involved with the budget process and just thinking about time demands for the town manager and finance director in terms of the budget planning process, and be able to get the hearing for the long-range capital plan done. So when do you do, I can't recall, John, when do you do the hearing for the capital plan? Do you have a hearing?
So that's in February.
Yeah, so it's after it's already been presented to the select board, correct?
Yeah, that's under the charter, and that's before they adopt it. So, if the board is considering this to be part of that process, then there really shouldn't be a hearing by the long-range planning committee before it goes to the select board, since the select board wants to have the final say. Perhaps you make that all part of your public hearing on the capital plan and the long-range plan all at the same time. But that's up, you can do it any way you want. Since these are recommendations, I'm not sure where the hearing process falls into a recommendation. If you're then gonna change it, then it kind of defeats the purpose of having the long-range planning committee do the hearing.
And the hearing process, again, we're trying to, I think the hearing process is to test your assumptions. Create an
Yeah, so
opportunity for the public to test your assumptions before they get so far down the road that you can't turn the ship around.
So the other thing, keep in mind, the goal here is to have an objective capital planning process that doesn't become subjective. And so if the select board are going to have the final say and are going to vary the objective process that the committee has set out, that kind of undermines this process.
John, would you have time, if we did it all at once, would you have time if there were serious flaws to send the work back and still make your budget deadlines?
Well, so bear in mind, the long-range part of this is not something that's
not
going to go to
binding.
town meeting.
Right.
It's not something that is voted on in anything more than a planning document.
Right,
The capital plan itself is the 5 years.
okay.
This really just sets up beyond the 5 years what's in the queue that's going to be considered down the road.
Okay.
So I really see this part of the plan having less significance when it comes to the select board and the policy.
Yep.
You ultimately approve the capital improvement plan, but this is really to identify all those things that everyone says we never know are coming, and it's really an attempt on our part to figure out when these things should come up and how they should be addressed with respect to the debt service of the town and the other priorities that we're all facing. So I really think if you let this process get started, you can tweak it along the way, but I think the goal here is to really start with something that we haven't had in the past.
So, given that discussion and everything that's been said, can we revisit the deadlines, take out the public hearing, or fold the public hearing into the regular, normal hearing process? How would we restate where we are?
So I would just take out the November date and make it January so it's consistent, so that you're getting, as part of your capital improvement plan package,
Yes.
with your 10-year motor vehicle, your building and facilities, and your 15 to 20-year or your additional 15-year long-range capital plan, it's all in the same document.
Great.
So you have a book of all your planning and all of your financials all together. The finance committee gets it at the same time, and it really keeps everything more organized than trying to come up with a different schedule for a portion of what you're trying to get to.
That works.
Okay.
So if I can just
Please.
interject with that, I agree with John in that respect, because I would think the long-term planning, capital planning document is just, just that. And the capital plan is just your 5-year actual funding look
Right.
for that. So it really needs to tie out to that long-term planning document. Long-term planning document is your umbrella. The capital plan falls under that umbrella as something that needs to be funded by town meeting in the foreseeable future. So it makes sense to me that those documents should have the same deadlines and the same hearing.
Great. So, John, you good with wordsmithing
Yep.
that?
Yes.
Great. Any other points on this? Great. I'll need a motion.
Madam Chair, with those edits, I would move that we approve the issuance of the charge to Long Range Capital Planning Committee.
Second?
Further discussion?
Just, do we want to, it will, once we've approved this, will that open the people to, will that
The committee appointments?
automatically let people start applying for this?
John?
Yeah, so I'll make the changes. I'll send it to everybody, and we can go ahead and post it, begin to accept applications, and then we'll identify that for you, and you can start scheduling your interviews.
Actually, I believe that you and I have already placed that on the planner. So, yes. You don't need to check it now, John. We'll visit it
It's
tomorrow.
on for tonight to have that done, but we normally have it out for, I would expect you'll be able to do your interviews in January.
Yes, that's what I mean. They're on there.
Yep.
Kathy, did you have an additional point?
Yes, I do. So just to be clear, this is to be put in place for next year, correct? Because there's no
Oh,
way.
it's supposed to be done then. It's supposed to be done in 2 weeks, Kathy.
No.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is the first stage, but the intent is to have a long-range capital plan.
Right, we
done
don't even have a
for next-
committee yet.
For January 2024.
First
I just
report is,
wanted-
January,
Year
a year from
24,
January.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Kathy, please. But
Thank you.
good to confirm.
Yes.
Great. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent, and thank you all. There were other folks who helped with crafting this, so thank you. Okay, review and vote to send letter to Mass DEP on the Title V and watershed permit issues. Now everybody had a chance to read it. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, if I could, not the first letter, I'm going to start with the second letter that was put in the packet, is a draft of a comment letter that was considered, developed, input from both the Wastewater Management Advisory Committee, our consultant, Mike Giggy, George Meservey. So what you have is, before this top letter came out, the recommendation that we get into these specifics to assist DEP in a supportive way, because we do think that there are some either definitions, clarifications, assumptions, all with the idea that we think they'll listen very well because of the progress we've already made in the Pleasant Bay watershed, and we basically say we hope they'll consider, make edits, and, tell us, so they can be responsive. What did happen last Friday, just after noontime, is the first letter. So we're all on track thinking the deadline to submit was this Friday. And lo and behold, DEP's received a number of comments, requests, concerns. Meph and I were at the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association where DEP spoke to us, and in that morning session of all the Cape selectmen and councilors, we heard DEP share with us that this potential extension of the comment period to sometime in January was imminent, although she couldn't say when. We get home from our meeting, and then here it is. So I would say it's to me, just looking at this, if I were in DEP's shoes, the extensions out there, we certainly have the ability to supplement our comments, but I think since the committee put together some fairly detailed comments, it might be helpful for us to want to authorize you, Madam Chair, to submit this. I think there are copies that are intended to go to a Board of Health and others so that we're all on the same page. But I would suggest, again, if the board has any questions, I'm happy to help answer them, but we might want to pop this in and send it in a helpful way to DEP with the reality that as we read more of others' comments, we might supplement and say, in addition to what we sent in on whatever date, we're going to follow up. So that's the possibility.
That's great, Kevin, thank you. Any other comments? Matt?
I just have a question, maybe Kevin, you know the answer. The process of setting a TMDL for, let's say, Nauset Estuary, how long does that take?
That has been discussion at the Management Committee. If you read the regs, it's either the existing TMDL that's been set through the reports in the EPA and the state, or with scientific data. We have some scientific data, but even in our questions, we're raising that. To be determined. We think that if we're driving the bus, particularly with our joint efforts with Eastham, we may be able to glean what that quality of that scientific data means and fit to it on our time frame, not someone else's. So that's the hope.
Good question. Mark, anything?
Yeah, I think it's just too preliminary for us to get too wound up in this right now because everything is in such flux, you know. I mean, initially my thoughts were, you know, we're sewering downtown, which is going to help eliminate a lot of nitrogen entering Town Cove from our side. Eastham, on the other hand, you know, hasn't made any movement in that direction. They have so many, as you go out of Town Cove, yeah, Orleans has a lot of big houses that are on the cove. Eastham has huge numbers of those small, old quarter-acre lots, half-acre lots, so much, that are all on septic systems and stuff. And so, at some point, something's going to have to be done. So, you know, I don't know how we can get too worried. Well, we need to be worried about what's going to happen to the water, but, you know, in terms of trying to make an impact on it right now, it's just way too much got to take place between that happening and today, because the regs aren't set. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know what they're going to do for us with a shared watershed. We don't know what Eastham is going to be able to do or want to do. So I think, you know, what Kevin is saying is we're in a good position to drive a lot of that discussion because of the work that we've done in the town of Orleans already. So we just have to kind of stay tuned.
And if I can add too, the couple of joint meetings we've had with Eastham, they are actually doing very good planning with qualified consultants. I think what it does come down to, though, is what is their septic loading, because that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking stormwater. We're talking about count your septic systems, just as you said. What is that load, and what are you responsible for? Because we know ours. And I think we're trying to be in sync on that, but like Mark is saying, let's not get too far out in front, because, again, DEP is hearing comments from everybody and their brother. You know, people pushing to get these approved, and other people saying too much, too big, too costly, too fast, that sort of thing. So they're going to resolve it. I do think that these are going to get issued, but given the fact that they want to give a little more time, I think is an indication that it's going to take a little longer than they originally thought.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yep.
Michael, anything on this?
Nope.
I have to say I was grateful because sections 4 and 5 particularly, where you're asking specific questions, we're looking at growth. I mean, I would rather send this because the flip side of this is us being proactive and going after watershed permits so that none of our residents have to worry about the expense that they're hearing about, and that they understand we are proactively looking to protect the town for their individual health and safety and the town's health and safety. So I would love to have a motion to sign this and get it off, even if
So
we
moved.
send other letters.
Second.
Any other discussion?
The only thing to add is, again, I hope we do put in the minutes that we would do this with the idea that we may supplement
Absolutely. As
for
such.
the deadline of January 30th.
Yeah, yeah, great. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. I love it when we're together on this. And I'm going to pause to sign because with this kind of evening, I can't count on remembering later. Cool. All right. Off to,
We're
it's
9
10
minutes ahead.
Yeah, it's 9 minutes ahead. Anything you want to do, because we have an advertised time for our guests for Nauset
We could
Regional
get the
School
town
District.
administrator's report.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Let's go to the end of the meeting. John, you want to,
So, yeah, a couple things for the board. I forwarded you last week our communication with Jeff Soers from Julian Sears' office. We tried yesterday to reach him for an update, and the latest we've been told is that the Senate Council has completed their review. It's ready for action. Julian Sears' office has requested the committee on third reading schedule it for a vote of the body. Apparently, they work just on Monday and Thursday. And so we were hoping that I would have an update for you tonight to tell you when it's going to be scheduled for vote. Unfortunately, I don't have that for you. So I have it on again for next week. We'll reach out again because there's probably maybe if they're going to have 5 meetings, between now and the end of the month, we want to make sure that this is on there for one of them.
Right.
So, but the good news is we at least got through the logjam of why it was being held up. That's all resolved. Now we just have to make sure in the informal session, it can't be controversial. It has to be basically a unanimous vote. So hopefully that'll happen and it'll be hopefully within the next week because the week between Christmas and New Year's, I'm not sure what they're going to be doing in Boston.
thank you, John. And John, is there any other item that you want to cover?
Yes. Yeah. So the other item, I just want to provide the board with an update. We've had to postpone our recreation programming primarily because Brendan has been out with a medical issue. So he should be back on the 22nd. So we've been in the communications with Brendan. He is going to be picking up the programming. He's reached out to all of the coaches, sending information to the parents for the basketball program, which is the one thing that's going to be scheduled to start in January. And he's reaching out to the coaches. My office is going to be doing the Corey and Sori checks, which is the criminal background and the sexual history clearance for anybody that's going to be working with the kids. Brendan is looking to have the gyms. He's checking on the dates when the gyms are going to be available. He's going to be working with OES to see if he can use the school during school vacation. Our original outreach to the parents was that we needed 2 weeks. So with Brendan coming back, that is the 2-week window. So our goal is to, as best we can, not miss a beat. And I hope to have further information for the board next week where we can have a discussion on next steps. But I just wanted to update the board and the public listening that we are working very hard to make sure there's minimal impact on the participants of the program. And Brendan Gutman, who ran the program for 30 years, is ready to go as soon as he can get back in action, which will hopefully be next week.
God bless Brendan. Meph?
Hey, John, the rec committee meets tomorrow, and it would be great if somebody from town staff attended.
Tom will be there.
I believe Tom Daly is planning to be there.
Yeah.
Great, okay.
Yeah.
And Tom will certainly be able to speak to the same issues I am with you this evening.
Right. Thank you, John. Anything else? No, okay. John, that's good? You're done?
Yes, that was a short one, Andrea.
Thank you. It's good. While we have just a few minutes, but everybody's here, and I would ask FinCom to come forward if they'd like. I see Judy and Chris with us, and I think Brooke might be waiting in a waiting room, but while we have a minute or two, the tables are for FinCom. Do you, Nick, do you want to call your group to order once you guys get settled? And then Judy and Chris, if you want to join us at the podium or pull up a chair, however you want to do it. And thank you for being in the room. It's so much nicer than seeing you on Zoom. Trust me, we're zoomed out. Yeah, I bet.
So, the Finance Committee will convene for the joint session.
Do you have anybody online, Nick? Do you know?
I don't see anybody online unless there's a secret.
I took his jacket off this
But there are plenty of us here.
Great. Okay, and I don't know, Judy or Chris, if there's anybody, you've got other folks that are welcome to speak as you wish. Okay. It's just about 2 minutes, but I think we're good if you want to go. Great. And Chris, do you need the screen? You're going to do?
Yeah, we're going to do a presentation, if that's all right.
Darken and shift. Thank you for coming in.
Yes, he has to drive further. I'm just done.
Just to, while we're getting set up, our format will be your presentation and then questions as we have time for. And folks in the room and then folks on Zoom. That work for everybody?
Works for us.
Okay.
Nice.
Anytime?
Yeah, Chris, any?
Excellent, all right. Let's make sure I know how this works.
I thought Tim wasn't going to be here. I thought he was going to go to his mom's birthday.
I thought so too. It's tomorrow. All right, good evening. I'd like to thank you for having us here to do a presentation concerning the January 10th vote on the request for additional funding for the high school building project. Our community faces a challenge in completing the vision of education that is represented in the building project for Nauset Regional High School. That challenge comes in the form of a cost increase that is over the estimate. That cost increase is represented in the contractor's bid to construct the high school. It is important to remember that bid, it is important to remember that the original cost estimate is 3 years old. It should also be noted that in the past, we were dealing with an estimate, the best calculations of professionals. Currently, we have a bid. A bid is the actual cost that the contractor will charge us to build the school building as designed. The increase in construction cost is caused by many factors: labor shortages, material supply problems, transportation issues, and our location. One of the largest factors is the COVID pandemic and the crazy economic conditions it has brought in our society. The Nauset system does not stand alone in its challenges. Of the MSBA's 16 current school building projects in various stages of development, they are all over their estimated budgets by similar amounts. It is just a statement of the times that we live in. It is as a result of these challenges that the Nauset community has a question before it concerning the future of education for our children. So let us take a minute to review how we got here and look at the options available to us moving forward. The concerns of a 50-year-old high school building and its deficiencies came to a head in 2014. It was realized at the time that it would take millions of dollars to maintain the building in its current form. The trouble was that the current form was old and tired, and at 50 years old, it seemed to be a poor use of resources to pump millions of dollars into an old building. The most cost-effective solution was to look to rebuild or completely rehab the building, or a combination of both, which is the path as a community we chose. In 2015, we applied to the MSBA to be a part of their school building program. We were looking at that point in time to minimize the costs on local taxpayers and to get the state to contribute funds to address our building problems. In 2015, the MSBA turned us down. We applied again in the fall of 2016 and were accepted into their program. At the 4 town meetings in the spring of 2017, the citizens of our community voted to approve $1.3 million in funding for a feasibility study of the high school, which is the first step in the MSBA's building program. Judy?
Are you going to ask me to do these slides?
I'll do the slide.
This is a real tag team here.
Yeah.
Okay, so once the feasibility study, the money was approved, that started a 2-year, what I would call the design process. And it followed MSBA's very set, very tested requirements, their procedures, to assure that we get the best, and the citizens and the students get the building that we want efficiently and effectively. So, in addition, a number of things were taken to set this process in place. One, the school committee voted, had a discussion and a review of the configurations of the school, and after discussion, voted to retain the 3-year middle school and the 4-year high school. Not all high schools and middle schools on the Cape have that configuration. We felt that we had a successful model and that there was no reason to change it. Based on that, the MSBA, with its own formula, set the size of the school. At the same time, the staff and the faculty at the high school began developing the educational vision. And I bring this up because I think it's important that we remember that this is a building that's not chasing a number. This is a building that is designed to address an educational vision. And that vision included looking at what we wanted for our students. What is a graduate going to look like when they come out of the high school? It looked at how the building can support and enhance this learning. So the building in itself is a partner. It looked at academics. It also looked at our performing arts and our fine arts, which we have strong programs, award-winning programs. It focused on connectivity. It was very important to them that the students and the faculty can connect more, that they can collaborate, and that they can communicate better. And this is what the building is designed to address. Forums were held in each of the member towns to get their input on what the citizens thought were important. And one of the things that kind of coincides with this educational vision was to keep the feeling of this campus school. It's unique in this part of the world, and it was felt strongly that this plays a part in the learning. A building committee was formed. We have a 17-member building committee that's not just school people. There's school administration, there's some school committee members, but they're representatives from all 4 of our towns. We have Ron Collins is on it who's on Orleans, Griffin Ryder, also on it. So representation across all 4 towns. The committee hired an owner's project manager and an architect, and the design really started in earnest. They came up with 13 potential design options to look at. And they were in 3 categories. 1, just bring it up to code. Just leave the building as is, but bring it up to code because it is not up to code. That we would have received no support from MSBA. And it came in at about, in 2019, at about $96 million. The second would be design completely new. That was difficult because we wanted this campus feel. It also would have brought in some money from MSBA, but less than the maximum, and it was estimated at over $140 million. But the renovate addition model, this kind of hybrid model, which we eventually chose, brought in the most MSBA contribution and was at about $131 million. So that preferred building design that was then selected was, again, we went out to the towns, and each town had town forums to get their input into what the high school should look like. And that got us to the end of 2019 and brought us to the beginning of 2020, when everything was submitted to MSBA for their approval in January. And in February of 2020, the MSBA approved not only our preferred design, but also the project budget. And, very importantly, they awarded us approximately $36 million in state funding for the project. And then comes the spring of 2020, when we were planning to go to the town meetings to ask for approval of the $131 million. And it's a date probably many people remember. March 13th, 2020 was the date. Schools closed across Massachusetts. All the kids were sent home, not to be seen again until the following September. And all of us went off scurrying into our forms of hibernation or seclusion, and I don't think I've seen some of you in person since then. This might be a first. So as a result, we had to postpone our vote, unsure of what was going to happen, and we get into 2021, and it was still unsure of how town meetings were going to be held. So we did the district-wide vote, March 30th, 2021, when all of the voters of all 4 towns were asked to vote on our high school, our budget of 131 plus, and they did at a resounding yes with a 70%, over 70% voter approval. And then we had the money, and then the next phase started. Thank you. You're welcome.
So let's address March 2021 to present. In that time frame, the building design was developed into blueprints and bid documents. These documents were thoroughly reviewed by the MSBA to make sure that we met the guidelines established in their building program. During that time, we also purchased 37 mobile trailer units. They were bought in order to service temporary classrooms and offices while the building was under construction, almost half a school in essence. Throughout the design process, modifications were made to the design to reduce the cost of the building without impacting the educational plan. During this time, roughly $7.3 million worth of modifications were taken to reduce the overall cost of the construction. This clicker doesn't like me. There, got it. Sorry. Finally, this past June, we put the project out for a bid. After 7 years of work, finally everything was in place to go out and find a builder to construct our building. On October 19th of this year, we opened the bids from our general contractors. 5 contractors were pre-qualified to bid on the project. We received bids from 2 contractors. Brait Builders being the lowest bidder at $134.4 million. The next lowest bidder was $15 million more at $159.8 million. The low bid was $29.7 million over our estimate. That same estimate that was developed 3 years prior. At our November meeting, upon the recommendation from the building committee, the Nauset Regional School Committee decided to go and ask the voters of our towns for the additional funds to build the school as designed. The decision was made for financial reasons, which we'll address later in the presentation. But the guiding principle to the decision was that once the taxpayers had voted to support the high school building project as designed, it in essence was their building. They and only they had the right to decide if the project should go forward with a higher price tag. The current plan as designed is owned by the taxpayers as they voted for it, they voted to fund it, and they own it. So it's up to them to determine if it's worthy of paying extra funds to build it. This thing just doesn't like me. The ballot question coming to a vote on January 10th will ask the taxpayers of the 4 towns to authorize $38.1 million in additional funds to pay for the high school building as designed. Let's go over the items that make up this cost increase. Additional construction costs, $29.7 million. That was determined by the low bid from the general contractor on the project. Construction contingency funds, $6 million. These funds are part of every large construction project. They are the funds that are set aside to pay for unexpected expenses that pop up during construction. These expenses tend to be more prevalent when you have a renovation, as we do as part of this project. Next, we have the additional soft costs in administration, $1 million. These costs include extra engineering expenses, rentals, administrative expenses, surveys, project management, and legal expenses. Next, we have FF&E/IT. This item is literally furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which includes technology. In the current market, in the current economy, these products have experienced a high amount of inflation in their costs. The money in this line item is to make sure that we have enough funds available when it comes time to furnish the school and provide the technology equipment. The next item is construction testing and inspection services, $125,000. Then additional money for moving services, $100,000. And finally, builder's risk insurance, $400,000. It should be noted that that builder's risk insurance, $400,000, is for the entirety of the project, it's not a yearly cost. And in turn, it is something that wasn't in the original budget, but it was taken out of it. It normally was, in the past, had been covered by general contractors, but the current setup is that it should be the building owner that is covered by this insurance rather than the general contractor. We should be in control of the insurance. And that's by MIAA, it was their push. So this is a cost, as I say, that wasn't anticipated, it wasn't in the original budget. So the revised project total, the revised budget is $169.9 million. This is an additional funding request of $38.1 million, as listed here. This is the total funding that the building committee requested in order to complete the project as planned. Our project manager and architect assisted in developing the figures for this additional funding. So these are the costs that make up the $38.1 million ballot request for additional funding for the Nauset Regional High School building project.
Okay, so here's the question everybody's waiting for. What is it going to cost us? And yes, it does cost. I can do this. Well, maybe. Okay. So we have two different slides here. Tax impact estimates for a 30-year bond and a 25-year bond. But I want to emphasize at the outset that these are estimates, okay? The decision of what the terms of the bond will be, and we'll have a better idea of the interest rate. The decision isn't made until May. We currently have a bond anticipation note that is funding the project that's due in June. So we will actually do the bonding of the big dollar figure in May, and then we will obviously know the terms, what the market is at that time. So I also would say that, all right, so let's just look at this. So a 30-year bond at a 4.65 interest rate. This is, again, an estimate, a conservative estimate from our bond counsel of what she thinks would be the interest might be in May. And the calculations that you see for each of the towns below are based on the individual town's property tax rates, as well as the town's percentage of students in the Nauset system. And these are the numbers of what it would cost if we bonded the whole thing, $133 million. So that's the ceiling of what we would bond. It could be less. So based on that, you can see the difference in the towns, and Orleans would be $37.41 per 100,000. And if I go to the 25-year bond, it's a 4.5% estimated interest rate. And for Orleans, it would be $40.38 per 100,000. Again, this would be the first year and every year because it's based on a level debt. The only thing that could change it was, of course, if the property tax rates changed, or the town's percentage of students changed. Currently, Brewster has about 47% of the students. This is as of October 1st every year. This is when it's determined. Eastham has about 19%, Orleans 21%, and Wellfleet 12%. That's as of this year. Next year, it could change, as Orleans knows it did last year. So one more thing on this. We have also been told by our bond counsel that should interest rates go down over the next number of years, that we do have the ability to refinance the bonds at year 8 or after. So that is what it's going to cost. And maybe I'll go to the next slide. Boy, it is tricky. It has a mind of its own. So what are our options? Well, we can vote yes and provide the additional funding, or we can turn it down. So let's take a look at both options. Got it. Option 1, I get the good stuff, the affirmative. So vote to provide additional funding. Why do we want to do this? Well, currently, this plan is 8 years in the making, and during that time, thousands of person hours have been invested. I would say more like 10,000 person hours have been invested. This is both volunteer time and people that have been paid to date because money has been expended on this project. Also, the new high school, as we proposed it, is the community-selected solution to our aging high school, and it addresses the educational vision that I talked about earlier. I guess you get more adept with this over time. Why else would we vote to add the money? Because it will protect both the $28 million that has already been borrowed and expended and or committed for work done to date that would have to be paid back, and it would also protect our $36 million MSBA grant. Another reason, the low bidder is a known quality general contractor. He's the same contractor, I shouldn't say he, Brake Builders is the same contractor that built Cape Tech, which came in on time and on budget. And finally, there is just no less expensive solution. Not now, and not in the future. Not a smaller school, not a different school, nothing that's going to be 4 or 5 years down the road is going to be less expensive than what we have before us. And there are plenty of examples. One is right over in Martha's Vineyard of what happens. In 2019, they had a $36 million project, $14 million grant from MSBA, basically going to cost them $22 million. They turned it down, lost the MSBA grant, went out again. This time the $36 million went to $50 million, and when the bids came in, it was over $80 million. So what was going to cost them 22 is now costing them almost 4 times as much. And I don't want to be there. So this is the least expensive solution, even though it is more money. And I'll do this for you. Look and see how good I am here.
It's like a pinball game. So let's take a look at option 2. The taxpayers could vote against providing the extra funding for the project. If the taxpayers vote against providing the additional funding for the project, in essence, the current project is dead. There isn't a plan B. We weren't tasked with developing 2 high schools. We were tasked with developing 1. This is the plan before us. This is the plan that the taxpayers voted to fund construction of. There are a few key points to remember here. We've already borrowed $28 million towards this solution. We have spent or contracted roughly $21 million of those dollars. Going forward, those funds will have to be repaid. It is also important to note that the $36 million MSBA grant is based on an educational plan which is supported and represented by the current building design. If we don't build the high school as planned, we lose the $36 million in state funding. Another consequence of voting against the building project is that we lose the quality builder that is our current low bidder. A company we know does quality work, as seen in the Cape Cod Technical High School that was just finished. It's also important to understand and remember that at present we have a solution to our problem, a problem we identified 8 years ago. We now have a known cost for that solution, and we have a reasonable timeline to complete the project. All of these are important considerations. If we are to begin this process again, a new project will take 4 to 5 years to get to where we are currently. We will have lost our MSBA funding. Once again, we will be addressing an unknown cost for a solution. There can be no doubt that a project 5 years down the road, regardless, is going to cost the towns and the taxpayers much more to pay for it. And remember, over those 5 years, we must continue to maintain the 50-year-old high school building that we own and use. We now also own 37 mobile trailer classrooms that will have to be maintained as well. Because of the age of our high school, if any major system fails and requires replacement, we could find ourselves in the position of having to bring the entire high school up to current building code. While this seems like an unlikely situation, be aware that 2 schools in the Nauset system currently find themselves struggling with this problem today. Let's just get a perspective on where we stand. We're in the 8th year of a solution to a problem. Thousands of people hours have been spent to develop that solution. $28 million has already been borrowed, much of it spent towards this solution. We have $36 million pledged in state funds towards building the project to help defray the cost to homeowners. That makes this a $64 million question. No one is happy that we find ourselves in this position. It is a result of the times and the economy that we live in. Going forward and providing the additional funding for the high school building is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do because in the end it is a solution that will undoubtedly cost less, be completed in the quickest amount of time, and guarantee the future of quality education in the Nauset region for the next 50 years. It is for all these reasons that the Nauset Regional School Committee asks for your support and requests that you vote for the additional funding for the Nauset High School building project. There we go.
Okay, let's open it up. Questions?
I missed the question. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm taking them. Any questions? Anybody? Yes,
Yeah, I've got a bunch.
great.
How would you like us to go? One at a time, round robin, or get them all out there?
You mean about your own personal list of questions? Just get them out, so, because that might save other people from asking them.
Right.
How's that?
Great. Thanks very much, you two. I know you are doing a roadshow. We're only one of many, and thank you for what you're doing. I think, as you know, Chris, I've followed this project from those early design meetings, sitting there, adding input, what could we possibly envision this to be. It was great. And I'm glad, Judy, you recapped that, because it brought us back to the vision that we all want for this, and I'm in support of this. I'll just cut to the chase. I do also want to let you know, because I've looked at the numbers, I've followed your meetings, I'm so glad to see that you have bumped up the contingency for this additional, because as you said, Chris, when you undertake a major renovation, you still have unknowns that crop up, whether it be the contractor opening up a wall and saying, gee, we didn't know that was going to be there. You need that contingency for that. So if anything, for folks that are saying, why did the overage come in here and all of a sudden it's here, there's logic that you've built into that. So I just want to really support that. The other question I've got, and you kind of addressed it in terms of what's been spent to date, and also, Judy, you mentioned about the opportunity to refi. Take the example of coming in under budget. Would you, as the towns do periodically, rescind the debt authorization so we, in our own financial planning, don't see a larger commitment in the future? So rescission of debt, is that a possibility?
Yeah, well, most certainly. I hate to say it, I don't think that the way we've done it in the past isn't, we still have, I think we did just clean some up, but we still had borrowing power on the books from roofs and windows and stuff in the past that we didn't borrow. So in essence, the money just would not be borrowed. So it would not be, we would not be paying for it, and therefore there would not be charged to the towns. We do eventually, we would rescind it, but we have not necessarily, I can only tell you in the past, been good about that process.
So, Madam Chair, my last question, and the first few have been softballs, and I think I appreciate the time we've chatted too on the phone individually. Chris, I really have appreciated that, but this is the tough one for you. If I were in the district, knowing the volatility in the market, and you've got to answer this question, why would you make an irreversible decision to commit to the trailers, to commit all this money, when we really hadn't got the package together? I just, you are out there now over 20 million committed. We own the trailers, as you said. Why did you, that's an irreversible decision you made. I'm just like, it's tough for me to come to grips with that, and I just have to put it out there.
Gotcha, and I understand that. I actually questioned it at the time frame when it did come up. The point here, though, is that, so if we had not purchased the trailers were purchased in July. So we are now looking, and they're not done yet, so we've still got issues with those. So we're looking at 8 months. So let's say we waited till we had a contractor in hand. We would have held a contractor off for 8 months until they could have begun actually doing actual construction in the building. So it would have just added time frame and time to the project. So I think we might have ended up paying for it on the other end, meaning a higher expense as far as a bid cost or whatever, them knowing they couldn't begin their construction for 8 months down the line. So while I agree with you, I question that. I mean, it is difficult. When you're moving forward, you're trying to move forward, and it's very difficult in this process. And this is another roadblock that we're in front of now. I've been on this all 8 years. I was there in the first meeting. So I mean, it's been, we've been working hard at this. So it gets, you try to move forward. So I can't justify that decision. That decision was made. I think it's the right decision, provided that we build the structure. If it's not, then we're going to look like fools. There's no doubt.
If I could just add to that, when you look at the trailers or the mobile classrooms, I think people get the idea that we've got 37 trailer units scattered all over the place. When Chris says that it's taken 8 months to do this, they have actually built a school out there. They're all together. They're in a T-shape. The classrooms are adjacent. It's like a building into itself. It shifts the center of the building, of the campus, over to the west, but it's contiguous with the other buildings there while the construction will start on the east side. And so it's kind of really built a new campus. So it is a major undertaking. It wasn't just trucking 37 trailers down. They're all rebuilt. They're configured to meet our needs, freshly painted, new floors. The classrooms are bigger. They're going to have reliable heat and air conditioning. These mobile units, mobile classrooms, I dare say, may be better than some of the current rooms in the high school.
Definitely are.
And they're bigger, with windows. Anyway, any other questions? I'm sorry, I digressed.
No, I don't believe, having had kids, and Mark can, I'm sure, testify, that those trailers, like we used to joke around the police department when they had trailers, it was better space than what they had to operate in. So, and the health and safety of kids while they're in school learning is paramount. Other questions? Ed?
Let's start off by looking at page 10 of your presentation, which is the rundown of the additional funding request, construction costs, and contingency. Why were the second line through the sixth, which starts with the contingency, soft costs going down, why were they not in the initial bids?
I'm sorry, why were
they not in the initial bids? Why did we not have a contingency fund in the initial bid?
I'm sorry, we did have a contingency fund.
And we're increasing it by $6 million?
We're increasing by $6 million. Part of it was spent on trailers, so part of the original.
This goes back to Kevin's.
The original expense for, the original plan held 16 trailers, was a plan on purchasing 16 trailers. At the start, we were told that's all we could get. And so the phasing, the amount of time, the various periods that were going to take place in the building for construction would have been at 3 or 4 at that period of time.
This really isn't a contingency fund. It's paying for trailers that we acquired. So when we do start digging in doing the renovation and rebuild, and we find surprises, that contingency fund isn't there for that, because we've spent it for trailers.
Well, the purpose behind the contingency fund is that you've got now only 2 phases that are going to occur rather than the 4 that would potentially occur previously. So ideally, it should cost less because the phasing is less, as well as 2, we move the children less. Their class, their educational time is disrupted less in that process.
We didn't have testing and inspection services in our initial.
We did, most certainly. It's the cost of increase. Everything in this process has gone up. So you anticipate, you have an estimate, but the costs on everything have gone up. And then this project is no different than other things.
All right. How was it determined to build a school for 905 students when the district has 620-ish?
The MSBA sets the number. They come in, they have a model that they use on every project that they work in. They look at the trends in the school, they look at the demographics. And this number was set by them in 2017. Yes, late 2017, early 2018. And upon questioning, the head of the MSBA came out to a forum that was held at the high school, and upon being questioned on that, he stood firm in his belief that that was a solid number, that they have used this formula and that it has proven right more times than not. I will also say that when you've got a school of 905, you're not always going to have all the seats filled. So it's like you don't always have all the rooms in a hotel filled. You don't have all the seats in a restaurant filled. So it's just not as neat as that, especially when you get into the high school where kids have electives, they take different kinds of subjects. So you may have a class that can take 20, maybe sometimes you'll have 18. So the MSBA says that you are fully occupied, fully utilized at 87%. So if you take 87% of 905, it's somewhat less than 800. So that's what it is. I will also say that this year our student population is down. We have about 150, over 150 Nauset students attending other public high schools in the area. They either go to Sturgis, they go to Cape Tech. Cape Tech has, are sending more kids to Cape Tech this year than ever before. At Sturgis, we've hit the high. And we also have a number of students that choice out. People talk about kids choicing in. Nauset students also choice out. There are a number of them, so that's 150. We believe that once this high school is built, many of these students, or these types of students, will choose to come back, and that's proven in Cape Tech. Our numbers went up by 20 to 25% in the number of Nauset students that went to Cape Tech the year that Cape Tech opened its new facility. And it's a great facility. So that combined with the affordable housing that all the towns are working on, we think when this building is up and running, you will see a change in those numbers.
Nick?
How many Truro and Provincetown students do we have?
80.
80. And what do they pay?
They pay somewhere upwards
Right over
of
20,000.
20,000 a
So
year.
it's not like the choice students
No,
that
no.
pay.
I will also say that Truro P-Town, there are two major costs that they cover themselves outside of that tuition. They provide transportation. We don't have special buses for them, and transportation is one of our biggest ticket items. And they also pay for special ed. So any student that has an individual education plan that requires extra help, ed assistant, or any other kind, they pay those costs directly. We pay them, they reimburse us. And special ed is by far the big ticket.
Big cost.
Ed, then I want to get it back to select
Yeah,
board
just
and the public.
one follow-up. Assuming the vote goes favorably, and the next time the Truro and Provincetown contracts come up, will they share the capital costs associated with building the building?
So, see, yes, I mean, the
Yes?
simple answer is
Yes.
yes. Now, I mean,
Fair share?
people would, so we're clear. So people have asked, like, will there be a portion of their funds that they give us donate to construction? I don't know the legality of that. All I can tell you is that the taxpayers of our town, of the regional towns, pay a certain dollar amount, and that includes the structures, the cost of the structures, to educate their students. That's the cost of education. So that's going to be that has to be the cost that they pay also. So yes, there's no, I mean, there's no question.
And now it's basically the operating costs.
Right, well, right now, actually,
There's no capital
we were
expense.
pretty happy that they were signed on to us to attend a 50-year-old building that was going to be under construction for, when they signed the tuition agreement, it was going to be under construction. The original plan was for 3 years of that time frame, and they still were paying for it. So, yeah, I mean, yes,
It's good to hear they're going to pay their share of the construction costs.
yes. Yeah. I mean, they're going to pay their share, and that share is what it costs to educate a child. And it's not going to cost the taxpayer in the district any more than it's going to cost the people sending their kids in, no doubt. We don't have control on choice. We do have control on tuition.
I understand that.
So, yeah.
Okay, select board, questions, Matt?
I just want to ask some MSBA-related questions.
Sure. I'll answer them as best I can.
Given that there are 16 towns sort of going through this same experience, I would suspect that there are some efforts being made to try to convince the MSBA to increase the awards that they've been given to these towns. And that being aside, we don't know whether anything like that would be possible. But should this vote succeed, and the towns vote for the $161 million, will that in any way impact what possible additional funding we might be eligible for, become eligible for with the MSBA?
I'm sorry, first off, let's begin with first. I don't think, in general, the MSBA is going to give us more funds. We've asked, and there's been some pressure, but I just think, in general, their job is to entice towns to address their old school buildings and entice them by grant money to build new buildings, to get the taxpayer on board to offset the impact of the taxpayer. And so I think that they are very tight with their dollars, and they're going to be hard to give it away. I think, though, that we have a much better chance of going at the state. The state has deep pockets right now because of all the COVID money. And they have also have an example of they have given funds to libraries. The libraries have had the same issue. There's a same type of funding that occurs for libraries. There are all these library bids that came in way over what they expected, and the state did give some funds to them or create up a system by which to do it. So while it will not happen prior to this vote, so we won't know about it, but that has been moved and it has been pushed by the school system. We have sent out letters and talk to our local reps and so forth to try to, pardon? Mask, right, our associations. I mean, it is, so yes, that is, I think, our best bet. I mean, nobody's closing any door if the MSBA wants to give us additional money. But I can just tell you, in general, they are so tight with their, in general, with their money, that I would not expect it. And so, I'm sorry, in terms of the impact of that, if it came in down the line, it would decrease the cost of the project, and therefore it would decrease the cost of the taxpayer. It'd be less funds that we would have to borrow, so therefore less that the taxpayer would have to pay ongoing.
Yes, Tim?
Yeah, so I've been noodling these numbers for a couple of days now, and as I look at it, so the Nauset School District spends about $23,000 per student, which I think is like 75th out of the 300 towns in Massachusetts. And with this additional capital costs at the high school, I think it's going to take us up over $30,000 a student. We're fortunate to live in a community with a lot of non-residents, so the impact on residents is not as high as it might be. But that's still putting us probably up in the top 10 of cities and towns in the Commonwealth in terms of what we'll be spending. Personally, I'd much rather be spending money on programs, teachers, and activities and programs than I would be on the building, right? I mean, the building is a sunk cost, and there's no way that you can flex it up and down based on the number of students you have.
Just to be clear, I don't think that it will change the per pupil expenditure as reported by DESE, because the per pupil expenditure doesn't include debt.
Doesn't include
Doesn't
that.
include debt, no.
No.
On any of those. So on any of the ones that you see, debt
Because
is not in there.
it's like,
It's off.
for the last 20 years, we haven't had any debt, and then all of a sudden you get it. So it's just looking at the operating costs. It excludes debt. There are 3 categories that it excludes, and I don't remember what, one of them is debt.
Well, the way I calculated it, I mean, it's basically, if you amortize that $140 million over 25 years, as was done in your calculation, and then you divide that by 600 students, it's about $15,000 a student.
But you can't compare it to other schools in the state, is what I'm
Okay,
saying.
but it's a lot of money that's getting spent on those students. Well, depending upon how you calculated it. And then if you look at it from a taxpayer perspective, right, that's the other way to look at it, and that's the way you presented it, it's about $10,000 per house in Orleans. So it's, you had about $37 to $40 per 100,000 of assessed value. Say the average house in town is $1 million, that's 10 times it, so say you got $400, and then you multiply that by 25 to 30 years. So it's roughly $10,000 per household. And that's a lot of money, but again, I'm not saying that it's an unreasonable amount, but it's all going into the building, right? And I don't think we're talking at all about what we're going to additionally be putting into programs, right? Because once you have a bigger building, you're going to want more more teachers. You're going to have more heating bills. You're going to have more custodians. You're expanding the requirements of what our operating costs are going to be also. I mean, and these are all costs that are going to have to get paid by the taxpayers in town. It's I just so I'm actually in support of doing this, but I feel really conflicted about what I think has sort of been a not completely transparent and capital-intensive approach to the way we're investing in education.
So, I mean, I think there's a couple quick points. I mean, first off, this is a once-in-a-50-year investment that communities make in education. It's part of what every community does. We're not the only ones. I mean, it happens all over, everywhere, in every town. 2 is that you're talking about increased costs, but actually I think some of the costs will go down. Operating costs will go down. It's going to be much more efficient. The building will be run much more efficient than, with energy costs going up, I mean, if we kept in the same building, our costs would be through the roof. I mean, it will be a much more efficient building when it's done, without a doubt. As far as we may require more maintenance staff. As far as the teaching staff, there is an education vision that has been placed, that was part of this process. The building was designed after. And that was not based on additional teachers. It was based on, I believe, what we currently have as far as course offerings. So I don't know that is a natural increase that would occur. Trying to think of what other points you have. It is always very easy to take a picture of where we stand now and say, this is going to be, and this is going to be, and this is going to be. But if we looked, actually, when we began before, we're at a 2.5% interest rate. It was looking like free money, and people were saying we should take as much of it as we could. So in turn, we don't know what it's going to look like when we do borrow these funds. We can talk, I mean, we put stuff out there just so people have an idea, but nobody knows because we're in kind of crazy economic times. There's no doubt about it. Nobody wants it to be bad, but I think we feel good that we have that 8-year option that if by chance the Federal Reserve has done their magic and interest rates do come back down, that we can go back out, refund this project at a much lower cost, and so it'll offset the lower cost to the taxpayer. I mean, part of the impact is just the increase in interest rates, without a doubt, has increased the cost of this project. And it's all timing and COVID. If we had those town meetings that occurred in 2020, we would be in great shape. But it's timing, and we rolled the dice the wrong way. It didn't come up. It came up snake eyes on this project, which I can't tell you how much it frustrates me. But
other questions? Lynn, can I just, I see. I just want to make sure I'm covering Select Board. Anybody else on Select Board?
Lynn can go. If there's time, I'll ask.
I've got a couple here. So ladies, split the time.
Just a quick
About 5
comment
minutes.
on Tim's comment. I had argued back with him briefly this afternoon on his comment about teachers and programming, and I would argue in support of the new school from a standpoint of going back to Chris's comment about the vision, the education vision, because my view is that given all the time that was spent in the design process and the programming and the effort of all of those individuals from the school and the community in staging the programming for the new school, that therefore this money is being spent for programming. And I would argue, too, that if we can solve the housing crisis, then arguably we'll end up attracting teachers. And if we can figure out where we can house teachers, then not only will we bring students back to the new building, that we will also attract teachers to the new building as well and support the programs.
If I could add on that, when I mentioned before that the educational vision, when it was written, it was looking for the school building, the physical environment to help support the learning program. And one of the ways it's doing that is, by the way, the classrooms have been designed and the Arts Center and everything has been designed. It brings more connectivity, so there can be more multidisciplinary teaching, interdisciplinary teaching. There can be a lot of cross-fertilization. The teachers are going to be more contiguous. So it will affect the learning program. But yes, we would like to have additional money for programming also. Wouldn't every school? Yeah. But
Lisa?
Thank you for coming in and going around and representing the interests of our students. I still have a high school student.
Oh.
Yeah. She's a senior. And I've been concerned with the cost as well, on one hand, but I'm in construction and development, and we're getting 20 to 30% increase in our costs, so it's also in keeping with what we're seeing in the industry. I really don't see any other way than voting yes for this, because I can tell you, we're going to have capital projects at that high school. My daughter is in classrooms now that have no heat. She has to wear her jacket every single day, and so do her students, her allies. There's no lockers, there's no place to put their stuff. So we have a failing building and a failing school. But My real concern, to be honest with you, is the staff leadership. And I would, I bought into this, you know, talking to Tom Conrad and knowing the administration and the principals that were there and the administration was there, and really trusted their judgment and the fact that they would be able to get this project across the finish line. Right, we've had leadership changes in the district at both the middle school and the high school. And this is a staff-run project, right? You guys are volunteers, so I appreciate that you're here, but I do find it concerning that our superintendent is on Zoom and not on camera, and we're missing the passion part of why we need to say yes to this. And there's no logical way to say no, knowing what I know about the school and what I know about our investment as a community in education. But I think that it's really, the leadership needs to step up and really remind us why we said yes and what is that vision that we're buying into, and help us. I know we're at a different point in time, and it might seem a little unfair that we're comparing to the past, but it's a big ticket item, and I think there has to be a little more heart to this, and a little more sensibility about the reality for those of us who are making the investment.
So let's just touch base on Brooke being here. I mean, the reason she isn't in here is because this was a political discussion, or determined to be a political discussion, and her being an employee of the system, it made sense for those of us that were elected to be the ones presenting. And so that's why it's been done this way. I realize it was different in the past. That was right when I'm aware of that. I was around with Tom Conrad and done entirely different in the past. As far as the leadership concerns, we're well aware of it. I believe we have in place. There are systems that are in place that are moving both schools forward. Just to be very clear, we're in very difficult times in education. I mean, we have 70 new employees last year. 70 new employees in the system throughout elementaries
Not in the region.
No, in elementaries as well as the regional schools. But I mean, those are crazy numbers. I mean, so it is just, you know, it's like one of those bucking broncos. You just got to hold on and try to settle it down so that hopefully things will calm down and we'll get it going. We have a great thing at Nauset High School. There's a magic in the education that's provided there. My kids are seniors and going out this year as well, and it's been unbelievable, the education that they've received. So whatever we can do to keep that going, to give that gift to the next kids, the next generation coming through, it's important. And we work hard at it. We may be volunteers. I can't tell you how much time we spend at it, though. So we you know, we see that, and we see that value, and part of this is one step in that process. You know, the educational vision is what this building is represented, you know, what was represented in the design of this building, and this is one of those steps. But I mean, the most important step is the teachers and the employees, and keeping that environment. And when you've got unions and administration, it gets much more. It is a much. We don't have a whole lot to do with it, but it is a much more challenging thing to assage, to get.
I guess as a citizen and a mom with kids, you know, hearing that you're going to figure out a way to attract and retain these teachers, no matter who the administration is, because face it, Nauset was a crappy building when our kids went through it, and it was still one of the top schools. So the school, the form of the school doesn't dictate the quality of the education. It's the people in the classroom. And I have concerns that the leadership isn't in it for the long term. I question whether or not they have the experience to get a project like this across the finish line, and their commitment to our community and being part of our community, and really, you know, making sure that the families who live here are taken care of, and we maintain the quality that we've all benefited from and our kids have benefited from, because I want to say yes. I want to say yes for the next generation.
But I think that you'll find that the leadership, the new administration team at the high school, Pat Clark started his teaching at Nauset. So they are very committed. That one of the assistant principals graduated from Nauset. So these are not people that are foreign to our community, and they are very committed. And I think everybody has so far been very impressed with what they have on their plate, what every administration in every school, wherever you are, have on your plate now, is to try to get learning back to what we used to call normal. And it's a challenge,
It's
and you know
pre-COVID.
that. And but I think that your concern will be addressed. I think we've got some good teams also in the high school, and the leadership that we have and the programs that they're starting in the central office. I think it's been exciting to work with them, all I can say.
Judy, if I could intervene, because I think it's a fair point, and I think as a region, we've enjoyed numbers that most communities don't with the longevity of principals and superintendents. It's extraordinary here, and I will take some responsibility that this was a political decision. Brooke is here as backup. This was a taxpayer voter discussion, so we wanted to keep employees out of that spotlight tonight. It doesn't address the advocacy that we were very much used to with Tom's active role as an advocate for kids in the community. But we're ultimately, it's a public trust. And I have great hope that as we tackle both housing and a new school, that we will have more and more candidates who are interested in serving in the educational community out here. So we'll see. Mark, you want to?
Based on one other just point that came up in this, we did also, in this season, we've hired a facilities manager who's stationed at the high school right now, who is in overseeing and working with the building committee and with the chair of the building committee, Greg is here, to oversee the construction and just making sure that there is continuity and that actually from the teachers to the construction, that there is that flow so that you're not ending up with a space that doesn't work. There has been more teacher input into this design, into this building, than I mean, according to our OPM and our architect, than any project they've been on. So I mean, that the building committee's got teachers on it. I mean, we've tried to adhere to the educational principles throughout this process and done the best as we could. And I think, I mean, we'll find out if we succeed.
Right.
We'll find out if we succeed. First, we got to get the money.
And we have an advertised 7 o'clock stop. Do you want to add anything, Mark?
Just one thing. One of my jobs when I was a high school student, summer jobs, was working at the Eastham Superette, and I worked with a gentleman there, one of the managers at the store, who his name is Ted Hicks, who was the building committee chairman in the mid-'60s for a new high school for Nauset. And so, you know, people would be coming into the store all the time and engaging him in conversations, and, you know, I'd be hearing these things, and he'd be talking about what they were trying to accomplish in 1965 and 1966 and 1967 to get a building project together for a new high school. And ultimately, the first vote was a no vote in the town of Orleans, because one of the selectmen in Orleans, a gentleman named Gaston Norgeot, was adamant that he wanted to keep the school in Orleans. And he thought it would be detrimental to the town to move the high school to the backwoods of Eastham, and he convinced enough voters to vote against it. And common sense prevailed, and people realized that the middle school site, what's now the middle school, was not going to be adequate to house all the students for Brewster coming into the region. It didn't have enough land. It didn't have adequate space for all the classes that you need for a big high school. And so a year later, the towns voted to actually build what is the Nauset High School today. And in that 1 year time, they lost huge amounts of what originally would have been part of the high school. They lost a swimming pool. They lost other classroom spaces and shop spaces, because they only had the same amount of money that they had tried to get voted on the first year. And in that 1 year, costs had gone up so much that they lost all those other things. I'm willing to bet I'm probably the only person in this room that was living here 50, well, somebody else,
Ben, yeah.
50 years ago, when those debates were taking place in the 60s, and then finally the school got built, the first class graduated in 1972. 50 years ago. It was a 50-year-old building. I taught in that building for 48 years, and I was in one of those classrooms that had no heat.
Yeah.
You know, and there are classrooms in the summertime on the south side of the building where the temperature inside the classroom is literally high 80s, low 90s. You know, things are falling apart. It's a 50-year-old building, and we need to do something with it. If we don't do something now, what a disaster it's going to be. And one last thing I think that we need to talk about, because it's been brought up here a couple of times with the housing crisis that we have. Young families, working people, can't afford to live here. We have jobs in this town that are going begging. You know, we're trying to put together an economic development plan for this town, but how do you develop economically if you can't have people living here and working here? How do you attract people here? Well, I know for a fact, one of the things that attracted so many people here in the 80s, in the 90s, was the quality of education that Nauset provided. And if the vote is no on this, what's the message that we're sending to the rest of the world? We're sending the message, I believe, that the town of Orleans has given up. We've acquiesced to the notion that we're the oldest demographic town in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and all of those, and I'm one of those people in my mid-70s, and probably 20 years from now, I'll be dead, along with everybody else that's my age here. And what are we going to leave as a legacy to those that follow us? You know, that if we have said we're going to prioritize our comfort for the right now, if the loss to those that are coming after us, that education isn't important to us, who's going to come here? Who are the nurses and the home health aides going to be? Somebody from over the bridge that can't make it down here when there's a snowstorm or the roads are slippery or there's, you know, rainstorm? Who's going to be taking care of the people that are my age? The carpenters and the plumbers and the electricians, the policemen. We got more openings in the police department now. We can't fill them because people are leaving. They got no place to live. So as a community, we're looking at economic development. We're looking at housing, and education is a component of that. It says what we are and who we are. And if we don't tackle, as you said, it's a once every 50 years you need to make this investment. And we made that investment 50 years ago, and look where it brought us. It's time to make that investment again.
Thank you, Mark.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a quick one I want to jump on, and only because Mark is basically saying what we have all known. Education's been a core value of our community. Core value, community. They go together. I think the other thing, too, Madam Chair, I'd like to be sure that you guys know what you're dealing with your building. We also have a similar issue we're dealing with our fire rescue building. So please, not for this discussion, it's a totally different topic, but as the middle school is going through its vision in terms of the field, programming, interactions with the town, we have a community there that we have to work together on. So as you think about our fire station building, spatial things that we might be able to do together, you know, where does the admin building in the future go for you? As buses become electric vehicles, you're not going to need a propane storage facility in there. So we really need to be part of that dialogue as that progresses. Because right now, we have no space to put a new fire rescue building, and we need one. So just as you have needs, we have needs.
We will continue that conversation. Thank you all. I just want to point out that there was an effort to meet with you with both committees to show our support, a united front. And
Thank you very much. Thank you for your
thank you for
time.
coming
Thank you
in.
for your questions. Thank you for your
So
support.
we'll adjourn.
We appreciate it.
So we
and,
need to take a motion to adjourn?
And we appreciate that, that I live in this town. So it's important to me, and it's important that everybody values education.
It was a good presentation. Thank you.
So we have a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Second. All who agree, say aye.
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 Brooke, hi. We're done. Thank you. Thank you guys for listening remotely as well. We are going to move into a different phase. Thank you, thank you. Okay, changing focal points here. Tonight, we're going to finish interviewing candidates. I believe we have 7 interviews to go through tonight. And then we will, after we finish our interviewing, we're going to have big discussion about what we've heard and seen and what we think. So let's get started. Ben, I thought you might be remote. You're here. Thank you very much. You're first up, sir. So if you just want to come up and say a few words, and then folks will ask you questions.
He's one of those guys who was here 50 years ago.
Yeah, he's the only other guy, actually.
I was in Wellfleet 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Doesn't count.
Right.
Again, Ben Zender, and hello, everybody. Thank you for having me in, and I'm sorry I missed the first round. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about my limitations. I'm Ben Zender.
Assets. Start with your assets, Ben.
Well, sometimes I try a little too hard.
We all know your limitations.
Yeah, we all know my limitations. You read about them in the paper, but I'm a native of Wellfleet, born and raised, lived in Wellfleet for 5 decades as a year-round resident. Went away to school and law school, come back. I've had a law practice here since 1990, so 30 years. I've been a resident of Orleans since 2013, so almost 10 years. I've been notably away from any activity in the town of Orleans. I really felt it was important to get to know the town for a long time before I became involved, because it is a different town. Obviously, Wellfleet Elementary, Nauset High School, went through the system. Great school, great school and a great system. And I came back immediately following law school, to work here, and I've worked here my whole life. I've been involved in a number of search committees over my lifetime, including for Cape Cod Legal Services, executive search committee for their executive director, for the Wellfleet Town Administrator, the one that hired Harry Turkanian back when he was hired. I was involved in that. I've been involved in 2 Wellfleet Elementary School principal search committees. So I feel like I understand the process. I'm always frustrated with the process because the search committees sometimes they're window dressing, sometimes they're not. But I've been involved enough to kind of know what I think is important in a TA for the community. My limitations in this are just because of my practice. I haven't asked any questions of anybody about what this involves. I don't know when the committee meets. I don't know how often it meets.
It's set, yeah.
So, I just have to say, if these meetings are midweek, 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, I probably have zoning, planning, conservation, health hearings, and I may find myself missing meetings. So if that's of primary concern to you, I really don't want you to consider me as an applicant, because if I have if I have to be in front of the planning board in a town on a gate, I have to be there. So I've seen the list of candidates. It's really strong. So I don't think you're going to go wrong with anybody you pick. So if you're choosing from among us, and participation on weeknights is an issue, I would ask that you not point me over somebody else who's more qualified than I am. So I wish I could tell you more about myself, but I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay,
So.
let's have at you. Any questions?
Known quantity.
Yeah, he is a known quantity. Well, except maybe to Michael.
For good or bad,
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, except to
Hi,
Michael.
Ben, Michael
Yeah.
Herman.
Hi, Michael, how are you?
Just what I had asked the previous candidates that had applied. In your experience, in your town manager searches, town administrator, what do you think is the best quality or asset to be looking for?
Well, first of all, can I tell you what I think my perceived limitations on the search process are?
Yeah, sure.
And throw them out there, and these may offend somebody. And the same thing happens in my capacity of searching for principals. You find that as a search committee, you're really there just to kind of vet people that have already been vetted. And you find that the consultant that's hired by the town to do the searching, and I'm going to be really blunt here, and if whomever has been hired hears this, they tend to have a group of people that they know, and they move them around from town to town, and you find what you're being asked to vet are people that have maybe good resumes, in other towns, but you're not real. But sometimes candidates that are really qualified don't make the cut. Harry Turkanian wasn't on that cut. in Wellfleet. You know, we had to push hard, and I had to push hard to make sure that he was interviewed a second time, because you really want your executive that's helping you with this search be aware of people within the system that are applying that may not already have been an assistant TA or TA somewhere else. So I tend to shy away from that idea of moving the pieces around from community to community, as opposed to finding the best person. I think the best town administrator you can get, it's difficult because town administrators, the minute they walk in, they're facing a lot of pressure. People want to get their hooks into them, and they really need time and protection to learn the system and learn the people and bond with their department heads and really be able to get their team in place before we begin to push them in different directions. So I think a good town administrator is somebody who people will like and respect right off the bat. It's somebody with really good communication skills, somebody who's highly analytical, and also I think if you had to look for one particular quality in a town administrator, by way of education understanding, I think is the budgetary process. They have to understand how budgets are done, and they have to understand the finances, because they're going to get thrown into that right away. So of all those things, I think, you know, they can rely on town council to help them with municipal law questions. They can rely on labor council to help them with labor questions. They can rely on you to help them with policy questions. But they have to be strong in terms of their ability to read a balance sheet and write a budget. And they have to be really, really strong in their ability to have people like them and respect them. The other thing I've learned in all the years I've done these is when you begin to interview people, when you get down to those last few people, you kind of know what you're getting. And when people don't work out, it's always something that you saw going in. You know, it's either poor communication skills, it's poor organizational skills, it's just something that, it's rare that something comes up that's a mystery to you when you're making your final selection. So I would say we as a committee, if I'm involved, have to go with our gut to a certain extent, and you have to go with your gut on what those limitations are. But to boil it down, good interpersonal skills, good budgetary skills, and other than that, I think, like most jobs, a successful candidate it's personality based more than it's educationally based. So those are just thoughts, for whatever it's worth. So.
If I can just follow up,
Yeah.
your limitations you mentioned about night times and week, can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah,
of what that?
I represent, just for all of you that know this, and you've seen me, I'm a land use attorney. I do land use development, litigation, permitting. I represent clients in front of planning boards, conservation commissions, boards of health, and zoning boards, primarily in Truro, Wellfleet, East End, Orleans, Brewster. So most of those boards, they meet Monday through Thursday, and they all tend to start at 5 o'clock and go till 9 o'clock. And you all know this because you're all juggling meetings. And so with rare exceptions, so if this committee is meeting, for example, every Wednesday at 5 o'clock, I'm probably going to miss a fair number of meetings. So I just don't know when the meetings are, and I don't want to be the person that can't show up and has an excuse 3 meetings in a row. So if that's a limitation, I'm certainly not offended to not be selected. I'm not offended to not be selected for any reason, but it was the first position that I saw advertised that at least was something I thought I had some experience with. So.
You both have questions.
I'll just follow up on Michael's. Ben, the 5 o'clock and onward weekday problem,
Yeah.
if they were meeting during the day, is that okay for you?
As long as I know when the meetings are a week ahead of time, I can put them in the schedule. And I'm assuming that you'll charge the committee and you'll say, look, we're going to meet every Wednesday at 10 a.m. or every Thursday at so-and-so. That's fine. I can put it in there. There's these meetings that come up, and the applicants have to have their applications heard. So, and I'm sorry for that. And it is what it is. So.
Mark?
Well, just to add that to my original question, I think we were anticipating that there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of meetings. You're going to be working with the consultant that you alluded to already. It's kind of going to be looking at his time frame as well. So
Sure.
I'm not sure how much of an impact that's going to have, and whether it's a workaround. I think it's worth, going forward anyway on your part. But my other question is going to be, so you mentioned that in being involved in these committees in the past, you have a consultant, and you know that consultant's going to have certain people that they're going to bring in.
That's my experience. Maybe that's not
Yeah,
what's going to
that are
happen.
known quantities and what. But so I guess what I'm looking for is someone that can lead the consultant in a direction where, having experience in the governance or the administrative aspects of a town like Orleans, and, you know, Wellfleet's just down the road. I mean, you know what goes on in town
A
government.
long way down the road, but
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
And you've done enough, you know, work in Orleans that you know how the thing operates.
I think so.
So that I want the consulting firm working with this committee to get from the committee the notion of what's important to this particular community. That they might have somebody, 5 people in their minds already as having done this so many times before as to who they think, you know, they want to bring into Orleans and get them a job and do whatever. But I want to guarantee, that I think, as close as you can get to a guarantee, that can only come from the committee members working with that consultant, that person is going to be a good fit for the town of Orleans, because you would know the town of Orleans much more so than the consultant knows it. And we had questions here tonight with the schools about, you know, the leadership that we now have, and you know, the impact that somebody like Tom Conrad made on the school district. You know, a guy that moved
Absolutely,
here, raised
right.
his kids here, was involved in the community and everything from lobstering to, you know, building to fishing to, you know, athletics and whatnot, as opposed to, you know, what we see now. You know, we have people that live off Cape and, you know,
Well, here's, to address that.
they're zooming it in, you know,
Yeah,
and they
there's-
don't live in the community, they don't know the community.
Well, there's a couple of suggestions that I have for whether I'm on the committee or not. First of all, my experience in the ones that I've been involved in, what happens is a consultant comes in and there's an application deadline. People submit their applications. Let's say you have 150 candidates. And then there's an initial vetting of those applications. And as a search committee in Wellfleet, we were given maybe 30 people to look at out of those 150. We weren't part of that initial vetting of the applications, which means that already off the bat, 2/3 of the application, maybe 3/4, you don't even get a chance to talk to. You know, and you have no idea why, and maybe there's an initial threshold of qualification that is required. The other thing that happens is our time with the applicants is relatively limited, meaning we bring them all in for one day, we spend 15 minutes with them, we ask them questions, and we hear the pitch. So I think to answer your question, Mark, you really kind of have to spend more time with an applicant, and I don't want to overstate the role of the search committee. It's your pick. You know, you ultimately have to feel comfortable with that applicant. I just think that maybe, I don't like feeling like we're just sitting there and they're giving us 30 candidates and there's already 5 have been pre-selected and we're supposed to get to those 5. That's the process I don't like, and that's what I've seen with the principal search committees and things like that. I don't want to be part of a dog and pony show, but at the same time, if we can just have enough time to talk with an applicant about anything and get comfortable with that applicant and just talk about where they live and what they're, you know, within the context of what we're allowed to ask. You know, other factors, are they going to move in here and be expected to buy a house, all that stuff, those are things that you can deal with and we can do. But we would like, I think we would want enough time with the applicants to get a sense of who they are personally, because I feel that's probably the most important thing you're looking at in hiring a town administrator. You know, the qualifications on paper you can look at, your executive search person can look at and all that. So I think I'm saying the same thing you said, Mark, from a different standpoint. So I think maybe having the search committee involved a little bit earlier than just being given the people who made the first cut, something like that, maybe something to talk about with your search committee, what their contracted process is going to be and what our role would be. So,
Good.
for what that's worth.
Other questions? Thank you, Ben.
Thank you all. Okay, thanks for
Great.
hearing me. Okay, thanks.
That's great. Oh, gosh. Okay, next up, John Osman. Welcome, welcome, and thank you for
Welcome.
being here in person.
Thank you for having me tonight. I was going to be here last week and things came up, so anyway, glad to be here tonight. Anyway, I'm known to most of you, I think, and just a little background. Prior to sort of retiring here 17 years ago, I've been a corporate executive in various companies for decades. Part of that function was hiring other executives, and I've been doing that for a long time. When I moved here full-time in 2005, I wanted to run a small business and ended up working for Citizens Bank as a bank manager, no background in banking, but only as a customer, but ran Citizens Bank for 2.5 years, and then TD Bank here in Orleans for 4 years. And you really get to know your community pretty well by getting plugged in through the banking industry and the boards planning board, a couple of terms there, and also the nonprofit community. I was on the CPC here in town government. And then my old industry found me, and I started my consulting business about 12 years ago, and I've been doing that ever since. And that really comprises two big functions. One is strategic planning, and the other part of that is implementing those plans for companies and corporations and startups and that sort of thing. Part of that function is hiring executives for business owners, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is finding CFOs, finding COOs, finding new company presidents, replacing entire senior staffs if they're not the right people in the right place doing the right thing for a particular company. So I do that all the time, and that's a major part of my role, is getting the right people to do the right things in the right places at the right time with some trajectory. And my history in hiring people has been, I don't really want to hire them for the job that is present. I want to hire them for the next job also. Now, in this particular case, there is no really next job, but this is the chief executive for the town. And I look at it this way, as not a town manager or a town administrator. This is a chief executive. And being on the planning board and in the midst of the beginning of the next comp plan, which is so important to us, we need someone who comes in here with an ability to strategically think and to implement. So we're going to develop a plan, but we also need a chief implementer, and this is going to be one of the people that does that. So the reason I want to do this is because the hiring of this individual is so crucial to the future of this town for the next many decades that we have to get this right. And to beam off what Ben just said, the candidates that you're interviewing for this are superb, and I know about 2/3 of them. And you're going to get the right committee. There's no question about it. So you've got some great people who live here in Orleans who are really dedicated to wanting to make this work, and I'm one of them. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them on.
In case Michael is not aware, though, you have also been intimately involved with strategic planning for both the police department and the fire department, and you are serving for the second time as a planning board member.
This is my third
I mean,
tour of duty at
yeah,
the moment, yeah.
yeah.
I did two times before, 10-year
Right.
delay, and then back doing that. And I've done the Orleans Police Department strategic plan, 2 5-year plans, and a couple of years ago we did the fire department here. And since then I've been doing Brewster Fire, Holliston, Massachusetts Police Department. This is sort of a side gig of a side gig, but it's one of those things where municipal organizations need strategic help and need planning, and it really is a pleasure to help organizations like that.
Questions, Kevin?
Thanks, Madam Chair. John, thanks for stepping up. And through the reference you just made to the strategic planning work, not only have you helped the organizations, but you've helped us communicate who they are, what they do, the importance of all their functions, both functionally as well as the service orientation of it. Embedded in number 3, I'd like to probe a little bit of what your thinking is, where we say this committee would work with a recruitment consultant to develop marketing materials and other community information to describe Orleans. So you must have some ideas how you think we should help describe Orleans to potential candidates.
Well, Orleans has a very similar challenge that a lot of companies have that are great companies. It's, you know, it's the greatest story never told, right? And many times towns, companies have a difficulty in expressing who they are. And I think that I can help with that. Part of my background is I've been vice president of marketing for 5 different companies. And I've spent a lot of my time promoting technologies, promoting companies, promoting products, services around the world. And I think I have some background in being able to take the things that I know about Orleans and putting it out there into the world to attract the right sort of candidates to come here. Because this is going to be a challenge, because getting the right person here for not just 3 years, but for a while, and to help implement a strategic plan and not just make the, trains run on time. That's, anybody can do that. That's not what we want. We want a leader, we want a manager, we want a strategic thinker, but, they need to understand what they're walking into, too. And we don't want to sugarcoat it. We want someone to know day one what this is about. But we also want to express how wonderful a place it is here and to broadcast that in the right way so we get the right sort of high-level candidates.
Thanks.
Michael,
I'm good.
you good? Yeah, you're good? Thank you, John.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
That's great. Okay, we're just going by paperwork received. Alan, another known, tell us something new, Alan.
Well, something new, I came to the shores of Pleasant Bay in June of 1939. I have had 57 years' experience in local, regional, state government in Massachusetts, both as an employee, an employer, and a volunteer. I have worked directly for 6 town managers. In that role, I helped train 5 assistant town managers, all of whom became town managers, and 2 of them you have hired within the last 30 days. I chaired the search committee to hire a new executive director for the Boston Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the regional planning agency for 101 cities and towns, 3 million people. I was the chair to hire that executive director. After I retired, the town of Arlington asked me to come back, and I served on the search committee to hire the first new town manager in 33 years in that town. In the private sector, I chaired the search committee to find a new president and CEO for the Cambridge Savings Bank, the second oldest bank in Massachusetts. The person we selected is still there. I have served on and chaired both elected and appointed boards in Orleans since 2003. I served as a select board member from 2013 to 2019, and I chaired your board twice. I've also served on and chaired the Land Bank Committee, the Community Preservation Committee, the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners, and the Affordable Housing Trust. And I still have it in me to serve on a town manager search committee. I've read the charge, I understand what you're asking for, and I'm ready to perform at your wish. Thank you.
Questions? Matt?
Hey, Alan, I just would be curious to hear you describe what you think in the next 5 or 10 years the town of Orleans needs from a town manager.
First of all, I think a town manager who comes in here, he or she has to listen. And then they have to develop a system of leadership. When that person walks in this door, they're going to be responsible for 150 to 60 employees and 35 committees. And they're running a corporation that has an asset value that Brad Hino told us about, $5.5 billion. And you have an operating budget at close to $50 million a year. And you're operating under the requirements of Proposition 2.5. It is an incredibly complicated process. This town has been incredibly lucky for the last 26 years to have someone that understood how this system worked and has made sure that we are now a AAA community. We are a community that people want to live in and work in. We've got incredibly complex issues, though. When I was involved in the selection committee for the new town manager in Arlington, the housing costs in that town were so high, this was 20 years ago, so high that we couldn't get anybody to apply for the job. And our charter required that the town manager live in the town. We had to go to the state legislature to change that charter so that the person didn't have to live in town. But that was a constraint, and I believe we're going to have that same situation right here. And we need to figure out how to make this a livable community. That's why I've been devoting my time to the Housing Trust, and my wife has been devoting her time to the Housing Committee. This is a problem that is not going to go away, and we need a manager who is willing to sit down and really think about it and talk about it and find solutions that aren't on the books today.
I like that.
Nice question.
Michael, please.
Alan, hi. Just based on your experience, of course, of 57 years in interviewing, hiring town managers, assistants, what do you think has changed in that time that makes today more challenging or different?
I think today it's the economy. We have a national housing crisis. The housing crisis began in 2008 with the bubble, and people got out of the building business, and we have a shortage. You can pick up any national paper now, whether it's San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, you name it, there isn't enough housing. And we're sitting in it here on Cape Cod, a community of 6,000 people, and we do not have the ability to provide housing for teachers, for police officers, for firefighters, and town employees. And we've got to think outside the box, and we need a new manager, not that John hasn't done it, but we need another manager who can take it to the next level. And I don't know the solution, and I think about this 24 hours a day. It's not simple, and it's probably going to cost money, but it's going to take creativity, and that's what we need.
Thank you.
That's great. Everybody okay? Great, thank you,
Thank you
Alan.
very much.
Ginny, yay, finally. Ginny got inadvertently left off last week's interviews.
I was crushed, but I survived.
Yeah,
Because I'm resilient.
yes,
So,
like the town.
yes, like the town. So, Madam Chair, gentlemen, good evening. I'm Ginny Farber. I'm going to do this like a teacher, and hopefully I'll answer all your questions embedded in what I have to say. I'm the current chair of the Conservation Commission. I've been chair for 3 years and a commissioner for 7 years in Orleans. I serve as the Conservation Commission representative on the Wastewater Management Advisory Committee. I'm on the boards of Orleans Pond Coalition and Orleans Can. I've served on the Orleans Dredge Advisory Committee and on the Water Quality Advisory Panel. I was a founding member of the Simpson Island Trust. I've also served over the past 20 years on the boards of the Harwich Conservation Trust, Brewster Historical Society, and on the Brewster Conservation Commission. And when I was on the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel, I served twice, once as the Brewster rep and once as the Orleans Conscom rep. Interesting. Volunteer activities on the Cape have been focused on environmental and historical conservation and protection. That's not always been the case. In Connecticut, where I lived for 25 years, raising my family, my focus was on education, a timely topic tonight. I advocated for early childhood intervention and special education programs and funding. That led to me being chair of the PTA Council, advocating for a broader array of educational program funding. In 1985, how many years ago was that, I was elected to my first term on the Legislative Council, a representative body much like our select board. We wrote ordinances, hired and fired, established committees, disbanded committees, and most importantly, set the town budget. My last assignment on that legislative board was as chair of the Education Subcommittee, which in highfalutin language gave me bottom line fiduciary control of the education budget. We negotiated the education budget, shepherded it through the town meeting and referendum process, which was quite contentious most of the time. I also taught high school math because I wanted to be loved. In the same town where my children were in the same school and where I had been an elected official. I taught everything from AP Calc to special ed, again, advocating for children. And during that time in Connecticut, I was on a number of search committees for the school system, for Legislative Council. So what do I bring to the town manager search committee? I have years of leadership experience in the public sector, much of it in advocacy roles. I have municipal governing experience. I'm a consensus builder, team player. I mean what I say what I mean. I bring passionate commitment to whatever I do, and I am a very intuitive human being. I read people really well. And just a side note, over the last several years, I've developed a great respect for the team of municipal employees who work in service to this town, and I want to make sure that our next town manager, not that our present town manager did not do this, but I want to make sure that town manager recognizes talent and encourages people to be innovative, because I think innovation is one of the key things. So what qualities would I look for in our new town manager? Orleans is on the cusp of major infrastructure and community facilities projects. We are in dire need of workforce housing and affordable housing. These require a town manager who has documented experience, because our first criteria is that they are experienced and know what they're doing, and the ability to immediately grasp the complexities of the physical, environmental, and social issues that loom large for Orleans and the greater Cape Cod community. This candidate should have excellent communications and leadership skills and be a consensus builder, and a sense of humor wouldn't hurt. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ginny. Questions for Ginny? Kevin?
Not really a question, but an observation. Jenny, your presentation was excellent, and I listened intently because of a few key things you said, and I had served with Ginny on Conservation Commission, as well as the what we affectionately called OQAP. But your point about reading people insight, struck me, because I just want to share. We would sit next to each other during ConsCom. Gina would be the type that would say, I really don't have anything to say, but through the dialogue, the back and forth, she would pick up that one question, and it was the key. And I just, again, thank you for your presentation and all that you've done for the town.
Thank you for your kind words.
Thanks.
Beth?
Hi, Ginny.
Hi.
You just sort of skimmed past your experience on various search committees. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, on the Legislative Council, we were the governing group in, I'm going to say this, in Newtown. It is December 14th. I try not to say it, but Newtown. And so we did interviews for department managers, police, fire. We had a finger in everything, because the rest of our town governance was a paid but elected selectmen and to select board members. We did everything else. And when I was teaching, it was the same thing, hiring new teachers, but I was also involved in a couple of superintendent searches on both sides, as a representative for the town when we were interviewing new candidates. But I was also asked by two, I think, superintendents to be on the committee that met with his search committee. So I've done it from both sides, and I think that from my perspective, that one of the really important things is that we do, as has been said, get to know these people and make sure that our consultant understands that this is going to have to be a very, very talented person who can think on his feet, is creative, is innovative, and works outside of silos.
Anything?
All set.
No. Michael?
No, just thank you. You've already, obviously in your presentation, taking care of my question.
Thank you, I tried.
Yeah, and I would echo Kevin's comment in your functions with the Chairs Committee, how you function on that committee. Okay, Andy Lestage. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening. It's nice to see you all. My name is Andy Lestage, and I'm humbled to follow Ben, John, Alan, and Ginny. I am a newcomer to town. My family's been here for a long time, but I moved to town just this spring after living and working in Boston for my entire career, but have chosen to be here in Orleans for my retirement and next phase of life. I've been in the commercial real estate business for my career. Many years ago, worked on the personnel board for the town of Essex on the North Shore of Massachusetts. In my professional life, have done an awful lot of hiring of both people to work for the companies that I've worked for, as well as third parties to work for our company. And perhaps most relevantly, recently was on the CEO search for the Beckett and Chimney Corners YMCA camps out in western Massachusetts. So I don't have the history and pedigree that my predecessors have here, but I'm an enthusiastic new member of the community, and if that new blood brings anything to the town manager search, I'd be honored to serve.
That's great, thank you, and it always does.
Mhm.
Yes, always does. Questions for Andy?
I would ask Andy, if I may, Mr.
Please.
Chair, what do you think the top qualities of the search of the candidate are going to be?
I think a lot of them have already been mentioned here, but primarily it's somebody who is a Renaissance person or a jack of all trades, perhaps master of maybe not none, but not a lot. It's somebody who knows a lot about how various committees and departments operate. You're looking for a town manager. This is somebody who brings together a lot of different groups that operate differently, different priorities and demands and so forth, and getting them to work together and work within the system is incredibly important.
Great.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you. That's it, right? Great. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you very much.
All right, and Paul, you're with us virtually, is that correct?
I just let him in.
Great. Let him get his video and sound going. Great. Welcome, Paul.
Welcome. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and I respect the better sense of value if you're not feeling completely 100%.
Yeah, I didn't think I should inflict my my cold on you. I'm just back from a very long international flight, which unfortunately took a little bit out of me, but I am getting better, and I appreciate this opportunity. I couldn't be there on the 7th because I was overseas. So I'm very much in the sort of the fresh eye department. I mean, I've lived in Orleans for about 15 years, raised my kids here at Orleans Elementary and Nauset High School. You know, I've been visiting Orleans since I was just, you know, a wee toddler. My mom had a house here, so I feel like I know the town. I love the town. I care about it, every inch of it, the waters, the housing, all of it. It's just so important to me. So I think this is a good opportunity. What I bring, I think the only thing I bring that is a bit unusual perhaps is the skills and background of a professional journalist. I've been doing this for about 40 years or so, reported from all over the world, you know, Moscow, years in Washington, started at the Lowell Sun in Massachusetts, served on a search committee in Congress. We were finding a person to take care of the Standing Committee for Periodicals in the U.S. Senate, and that was an interesting process. It involved a lot of collaboration with my colleagues. I was elected to that position, and I thought it was a good process. But basically, as a journalist, it just occurs to me, I mean, these are the skills. I mean, you're there, you're sifting through all kinds of things. You sometimes have to do it very quickly. You look through papers, you talk to people, you ask questions, you try to be penetrating, insightful, analytical. All of these things, I think, can be brought to bear. The extent of my involvement in civic affairs in the area is pretty much when Paul Niles asked me to join the board of the Cape Cod Lighthouse Charter School, where my kids went, which was a good experience. I love Paul, just a fantastic guy. And, I think that's what everyone has said. I mean, this person has to be a leader, has to be a listener, has to be collaborative, has to be sharp, very sharp, imaginative, numeric. There's so many numbers involved. So he or she, I think, has a massive challenge. And I guess, I have, a kind of a BS detector, which has generally served me well over the years. And that's sort of where I would probably come in on the search committee.
That's great. Great. Questions?
Sure.
Quick one, Madam Chair. Paul, this is Kevin. Thank you very much for putting your hat in the ring. And I'll just say, too, and Madam Chair, you'll probably say it, we only have 7 slots.
I know.
And we have 14 phenomenal applicants, so this is going to be tough. But, Paul, I do have to ask, and hopefully I can use that BS detector in the future if I'm ever in a gathering and it's appropriate, but do you have the time to commit? I'm hearing your travel and activity does still keep you engaged, or do you have the time to commit to this?
Oh yeah, I have the time to commit. I work out of my house. I mean, this travel I'm writing a book. It's my 4th book, so I did some travel. I don't anticipate doing a whole lot more travel for this particular project. So yeah, and my hours, I mean, I'm my own boss. So basically, I determine my schedule.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's great. Michael,
No, Paul pretty much covered it all.
the question?
Thank you.
Beth, Mark?
So, Paul, you've chosen, as you indicated, you've chosen to move down here and continue working, but living here. In order to do that, you raise your kids here, send them to school here. I don't know if you caught any of our discussions earlier on with the school committee.
Yeah, a little bit.
In light of us hiring a new town manager, what do you think? We've had some candidates that appropriately have talked about the finances of the town and maintaining stability and the status of the town, but do you have any notions about the future of the town and what you'd like to see a town manager do above and beyond the basics?
I think the housing issue is the most important issue and the one that needs to have a lot of focus and imagination. And I know it's a difficult one, involves a lot of different trade-offs and parties and so forth. But I think that's a real, it's an obvious problem. It's a huge problem. We want people to be able to afford to live here. Orleans should not simply be a place where relatively affluent people, elderly people are here. That's fine, but I think we want more of a mix. We want our schools to have good enrollment at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. So, those are the things that I think about. I think if you're going to price people out of living in Orleans, then that will just get you in the trap that we're now in. So that would be certainly a big focus of my questions.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else for Paul? Thank you, Paul. Stand by.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike, if you're ready.
All right. Good evening. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Mike McNamara. I live at 3 Little Bay Road here in Orleans. I've lived here now full-time for the past 9 years. I'm the founder and president of the Hog Island Beer Company. I'm the co-founder of the Cape Cod Roots and Blues Festival, as well as the Friends of Nauset Beach. I've also held a seat on the board for the Cape Cod YMCA Golf Tournament for the past 6 years. At 40 ripe years of age, possibly 39, I retired from the corporate world after a very successful 18-year career in the beer, wine, and spirits industry. Most recently, I was the Vice President of Sales and General Manager for Southern Glaciers Wine and Spirits, a privately held company doing $18 billion a year as a family-run organization in sales. I also held a number of senior leadership positions for Diageo and Pernod Ricard, the #1 and #2 spirits companies in the world. And I started my career coming out of college working for the E&J Gallo Winery as a salesperson, a district manager, and ultimately a field marketing manager. It was with Gallo that I transitioned from managing products to managing people, and that was a big, big, big change. Through these positions, I gained a lot of experience with working with search committees, going through the interview process, hiring individuals, hiring teams, hiring agencies, temps, as well as also firing folks when, unfortunately, things didn't work out. I've worked with the current town administrator and the select board on a number of different projects over the years, and I look forward to hopefully being able to assist in this process. Not only am I here for the now, but I'm also here for the future. My wife and I have 2 young children who are currently enrolled in Orleans Elementary School. And in addition to this, we're also running multiple local businesses. I've also always been a proponent of the saying that you need to learn from the past so you don't die in the future. That's kind of been tweaked a little bit from what the original quote was. But I do feel that we do need a fresh perspective when it comes to our town. Obviously, as we all know, COVID's changed Orleans, as it did for many other towns across the Cape, who mainly survived on tourism. And to be quite honest, I think COVID was the shot in the arm, I guess pun intended, that we needed to get us to where we are today. I had a lot of concern and questions around where this town was going to go. When I looked around at the age of the people, we talk about the oldest town in the Commonwealth, I really didn't know how things were going to shake out. I didn't know how it was going to work when it came down to people my age that may be potentially inheriting homes that like to travel and be international and not necessarily be locked into, being out in East Orleans or South Orleans hanging on the beach for the summer. That ship had sailed. And we found ourselves, now with kind of cultivating this really kind of robust, cool, almost fast-forwarded retirement world. So meaning that no longer is it the work to 65, 68, whatever it may be, and then moving to Orleans. It's now the 55-year-olds that are living here. And I found that, just in my community where I live, where a lot of folks, were empty nesters and they found themselves selling their homes and moving down here full-time, and they're still vibrant. They still got a lot of tread life left. And that was extremely encouraging for me, not only as a dad, but also as a business owner and someone that really cares about where we are. So this has been, I think, I like to be the glass is half full type of scenario, that we've been able to really kind of be able to celebrate something super cool that's come out of where we are here in town. A number of our neighboring towns have had some significant challenges when it's come to finding a new town administrator. And for many of those towns, it's been a very painful one. And I think that would probably be an understatement, to say the least. I think it's been said before, and I'll just say it again, that there's a lot of decisions that this board makes, critical decisions that you make, that secure and foster the ultimate success of this town. And I feel that this is and will be, whether I'm involved or not, probably one of the most, if not the most, important decision that this board makes during their tenure. I mean, obviously, Mr. Kelly has been in this position now for some time. He's leaving behind, obviously, a lot of work that was put into, what the town's been able to become, over the last 20-plus years. And that's been great. And I think that right now, it's a matter of, looking at who the next potential candidate is and realizing that retention is key, right? I mean, retention is big, whether you're talking about the police force, the fire department, if you're a CEO of a company or whatever. It is priority number one, because you put a tremendous amount of time, a ton of effort, and a ton of work, and a ton of money into putting into your people, right? So if we put some person in this role for 2 years who just looks great on paper and everything else, and then they roll into the position and they realize they're way over their skis or they're drowning, then we've done ourselves nothing but a disservice than resetting the clock and starting from day one. And some of the folks on the board here right now may not be here then, but I think everyone's got the best interest and wants to make sure that that continues to be the right move, so that we have somebody and we're fostering somebody who's going to be the right candidate for this role. Personally, I've lived through many different changes of the guard, whether it be a CEO, a president, a director, or a manager. And I'm not saying that change isn't a good thing. I think it is a good thing, and I think right now we have a great opportunity, as our town continues to change, to bring in somebody that's going to be very forward-thinking, looking at the challenges, doing a full SWOT analysis of what exists right now in terms of the town, and putting ourselves and preparing and positioning ourselves to be in a really, really good spot so that we can get to that next state and really kind of embrace this change as we see it in front of us. One thing, and I'm sure Mark will appreciate this, but as a sailor, right, when you get into port, and I've always done with my crew when I'm out, because I love to sail, I'm a competitive sailor, when I get back into port, there's a few questions that I continue to ask my crew every time we're sitting on the dock. And that is, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, and what could we have done differently? And I apply that to everything I do in life. I apply that to my family life. I apply that to my friendships with my buddies. And I think that's very important. So even regardless of whoever this advisory council becomes, I'm going to challenge and ask that they continue to ask those questions, because, like I said earlier, change is good. And I think it's important as we move into the next phase of the town administrator search. In closing, I will say that it's a good time to be making the choices that you have tonight. I feel that I represent my demographic very well. I think, and I look forward to, hopefully being able to serve the board here as well as the town of Orleans. I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Questions for Mike? Kevin?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mike, again, thanks to you and everyone stepping up. Really nice presentation. I know how busy you are, and I just have to ask a question. Are you seeing, although this is a one-and-done group, do you see any limitations of your own time? Just to put it out there, are there some evenings that don't work for you? Are there some times that you think you might have some pinches?
Yep. I'm fully committed. I have a 1-year-old chocolate lab now. That's changed my life. I will not be wheels up to Hawaii for a month as I was last year this time. So I'm here. It's a very good time for me, personally and professionally, to be able to play a part in this.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. Michael?
No, great presentation. They covered most everything.
Matt?
I'll just ask you, Mike, a question I haven't asked anybody else. So forgive me if it's unfair, but if you were in a room with the candidates for town administrator, and you were allowed one question to ask each one of them, what would that question be?
Well, this would be if there were, let's say, 3 candidates sitting in at the table here, and
It would just be the one question that you would ask of any candidates that were there. The most important.
If you could be a fruit, what would you be and why? Going back to my fraternity days. Anyhow, well, listen, I think it's very important. Obviously, finance and the financials are extremely imperative to have set forth. I would want to know, I guess you asked one question. So how do you see the future of the youth of Orleans being taken care of moving forward as one component of, you know, success, I guess, within the town administrator's position. And, you know, it's a challenging one for me just as of recent, because I know there's probably way more to it than meets the eye, but I know that currently we're in a position right now where my son was supposed to have a basketball game tonight with the recreation department, and it's not happening. And if we truly are, you know, serious about investing in the future and investing in our kids, unfortunately, as I talked about earlier, in terms of tread life, a lot of folks in our town don't have a lot left, and that's a problem, or a situation, not a problem. It's just it's a situation we need to deal with. So I think whatever town administrator we elect to bring in has to really understand how are we going to continue to foster youth here. I mean, obviously, the recreation department covers all ages, right? So, you know, what are we going to do in play to make sure that our youth is supported and have enough going on to not only keep them out of trouble, but also, you know, continue to make them, you know, at the same level as maybe some of these other suburban towns that have a little more, you know, of edge, if you will. That's probably a long-winded answer, but it's obviously one that's near and dear to my heart.
Thank you.
That's fair. Mark?
Mike, with your business, you've travailed many pathways through the town government and the structure of town government. What would you like to see in terms of questioning candidates for the town administrator's job? What would you like to see as a response to the questions about making the town government, as you said, not only financially responsible and looking at the future and the youth, the young people in the town, but just allowing the town to develop economically, to foster you know, a sense of working with, as opposed to just laissez-faire with our business community. What would you be looking for a town administrator to be doing in those avenues?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I mean, tonight there were a few parallels that were drawn between this position and the CEO of a company, right? So within that, there needs to be folks that are looking at not only how's the best way to run the town, but also what are some of the best ways for us to continue to keep people in the town, right? So when you look at various businesses here, you've got a lot of very passionate people that have businesses, you know, here in Orleans that work day in and day out, 7 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day, still maintain, you know, family life and everything else. And it is not, as many of you know, if not all of you, an easy task at hand. So I would just want to make sure that the town administrator, you know, the future town administrator, he or she knew that there are challenges that exist there, and to try to work, you know, directly with not only within the select board, but also with the Chamber of Commerce, you know, and other you know, avenues to really kind of, you know, explore what the needs are, and then be able to kind of come back and bubble that up to you guys, and vice versa, because, you know, this, go back to the CEO thing for a minute, right? At the end of the day, you guys are the town administrator's boss. The town administrator is the boss of a lot of different departments within the municipality. So that's important, right? And so that person needs to be able to, and I challenge my team, and always have for years now, to be able to manage up and manage down, right? Because there's going to be people that potentially have views and values on the board, you know, use the select board as an example, that may not be necessarily the right decision. So like, that person needs to kind of be very able to pivot a bit, you know, to make sure that not only are they addressing the concerns of the board, right, which obviously are elected officials, but also being able to listen and have an ear to the ground on what the needs are of either the small businesses, or the schools, or the different departments, that exist. So we don't end up in a situation where all of a sudden it's like things are getting published or what have you, and no one has any idea about what they are or what they may mean, and then everything's freaking turning themselves into a bit of a spiral. So I think it's being that person that, if you look at the stereotypical mayor, if you will, that's the person that's kind of out there. Mark, I hate to say it, but you are the guy. You are the guy that's out there. You're visible. You're alive. You're going out to places. You're meeting people. You're shaking hands. Like that to me is what success looks like for this position. It's not just being behind a desk and sitting here on Wednesday nights. It's being visible and being active in the community is what I think is going to be successful, because that's where the rubber's going to hit the road. That's where you're going to get the true, challenges or needs that the townspeople have, right? It's not just like getting the occasional email and looking at it and saying and trying to figure out what exactly that means. It's being out there and being a part of the group. And it's worked in many other towns, and I think that as we look into this candidate, whoever this is going to be, that we want to maybe have that be a certain component that's associated with this role, and not just have it be necessarily a job, but more of a lifestyle.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
This concludes the interviews, and now we move into the next phase. Gentlemen, I've been working with our town council on how to best do this so that we're going to try to take a shot at the highest level of open meeting law procedure. We're going to do everything by live discussion, and I would ask you to refrain from any kind of motions until we have a united slate, if that makes sense. So all of this is just discussion. We're going to throw each of our names, and that, I was told, Peggy, goddess of communication, the camera is aimed so the public can follow the board. We're going to throw up our top 7, see where that lands us, and if we have any ties, we'll work our way through it. And at the end, if we can get it down to a list of 7, that will be our motion that will then, we'll go forward with, if that makes sense. So the motion will be, we would appoint this slate to the committee. Okay, and since we don't have a note taker in the room, my sloppy handwriting will have to do in terms of our votes. Do you want to, does anybody want to start with their top 7? I have a marker that works.
I'll give you mine, Andrew.
Great, that's great, Mark, thank you. Let me find where you are. And again, yeah, okay. Go slow so I can check the right
Okay.
category.
Sims McGrath,
Okay. Yep,
Sue Messenger,
yep,
Mike Gradone,
yep.
Ben Zender,
There you are. Yep,
Alan McLennan,
yep,
Paul Starobin, and Mike McNamara.
excellent, thank you. Anybody else? Michael, gotcha.
I'll go. Sims McGrath,
Yep,
Susan Messinger,
yep,
Mike Gradone,
yep.
Ben Zender, Alan McLennan,
Sorry, who?
Alan,
Okay,
Ginny Farber,
yep.
and Michael McNamara.
I'll go.
Great.
Sims McGrath, Sue Messenger, Kent Vandersloot, John Ostman, Paul Starobin, and Mike McNamara.
Okay, Matt.
That's only 6.
And I'll just to give a little bit of an explanation, because this was a pool of all qualified people.
Incredible.
So, what I did was try to find a little bit of diversity to sort of meld with qualifications. So I'll start with Sue Messenger, Mike Radone,
Okay.
Ben Zender, John Osman, Alan McLennan, Ginny Farber, and Mike McNamara.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think Michael picked up, you only checked 6 of mine, so
All right, let's go back. Oh, yeah, I see that. So who do I miss?
I had Sims, McGrath,
Yep.
Sue Messenger,
Yeah,
Kent Vandersloot,
yeah.
John Osman,
I got John.
Ginny Farber,
Jenny is who I missed. Thank you.
and then Paul Starobin
Yeah.
and Mike McNamara.
Cool, thank you, thank you. This is, you know.
Can you, Andrea, just show me which column is mine?
And that, you've got Sue, Mike, Ben, John, wait, is that two, 2, 4, 6, 7,
right.
no.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Ginny and then Mike. Okay, and mine are Sims, Sue, Mike, some consensus here, John, Ginny,
Move your check up a little higher, Andrea, on that one, on John Osman. See it? Yeah. Put it on your line, there you go.
Stick within the spreadsheet, right?
right, right. Sorry, who was that, John, Ginny, where's Ginny? And Alan, and Ben. Is that it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Paul.
That's
No, you have 7.
Oh,
Okay.
wait, 1, 2, 3,
Does the
4,
chair
5.
get an
So
extra
never
vote?
mind. You don't want to give me 8 votes? All right, where are we, let's just do the math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got all of us down here. We'll erase if we need to tie. 4, check my math. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4. All right.
You have 7.
Sorry?
Yes.
The 4 and the 5s equal 7.
Great. Are you happy with that?
Amazing.
Can you just tell us who the
Yeah, so
7
we've got-
finalists?
Well, let me just circle in a different color because we're going to need to photograph this. I'll get that in a minute. I'm telling you, we're aiming to do this well. So we've got Sims. I have to make sure that I get a dry erase one. So Sims had 4, Sue had 5, Mike Radone had 4, Ben had 4, Alan had 4, and Ginny has 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And Mike.
And Mike,
Oh, sorry.
Mike had 4.
Mike had 4.
That's 7.
That's 7. Gentlemen, if you're comfortable, I await a motion.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to elect, or appoint, excuse me, Sims McGrath, Sue Messinger, Michael Gradone, Ben Zender, Alan McLennan, Ginny Farber, and Michael McNamara to the search committee for the town administrator.
Doesn't get cleaner than that. Do I hear?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would just say, I think we've all echoed it. This is not an easy, quick decision. The candidate pool has been amazing. And I do hope the people that did not get on this, I know a lot that are already involved in town committees, but those who are not would be wonderful additions to the town committees that we have. So really appreciate everybody standing up, and I think that everybody agrees.
And I bet the attraction was that this has a tenure from now until April, right?
30th.
As opposed to lifelong service on a committee. But term limits, we could make them 4 months, Mark, right? And then we'll solve something. All right, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Gentlemen, thank you for such an easy process. I have to fill this out. I'll do that after the meeting. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and congratulations to those who were appointed. What else?
Nice job, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Liaison reports.
Madam Chair, I'll do a very quick one, and it's in the good news department. As folks may recall, this is from the wastewater treatment plant.
I'm going to write as you talk, I'm sorry.
We were scheduled, and it occurred last Thursday, to have, I'll call it the all systems test of testing the plant and the pumps and the blowers and the controls, witnessed by DEP. It's referred to as the clear water test. It was done successfully. AECOM engineer oversaw the whole thing. We understand all is good, but not until we get the letter from DEP, so we are waiting. DEP did say that they're going to turn around as quickly as they can, so this means that the schedule that we've posted on the website is what we're following. So provided the DEP letter comes in soon, Board of Water Commissioners then indicate to the Board of Health that the plant is ready to go into service through substantial completion. Board of Health then in January notifies those folks in the sewer service area that they will have a year to connect.
And there is something else you want to tell us about, I believe.
I'm all ears, but please.
Involving some large scissors.
We haven't got
haven't-
the invite out,
Okay.
but there will be a ribbon-cutting ceremony on Wednesday, January 4th, at 1 p.m. at the plant. All dignitaries are welcome. There will definitely need to be a little limitation, like we can't have all hundreds from the public, because the plant will still be going through its startup mode, but we're looking forward to thanking those who have contributed to this and cut the ribbon and turn the plant over to the operator.
It's a big day.
It's a
for Orleans.
wonderful time.
It's a
It
big
is
day.
a wonderful time.
That's great, yeah. Michael, anything?
No, I just had the Ag Committee, and, well, it's not nothing, but they really, the part of the conversation was about Putnam, and that continues. I think I mentioned last time about the very generous donation from the family for $15,000, and there's a lot of effort from the Agricultural Committee to really look at the next phases and the water and electric and really supporting that. It's a very exciting, positive project for the town, and if you have not been to it, it's, it is the winter, but it is still a nice place to visit, so take a look around.
It's exciting. Meth, anything?
Yeah, and the Finance Committee, they spent a lot of time talking about the school, as well as the audit report that the town got. And the only point that I think I would like to sort of share is on the school issue, and this is something that I agree with, so I wanted to make sure it got out there. And I didn't ask the question tonight because we ran out of time, but without sort of distracting things away from the fact that we're trying to build a school here and that's the purpose, it is still, and not just the high school, but the middle school and our elementary school are facilities that the taxpayer has a lot of money in. And I think that the school committees, both regional and Orleans, should be thinking more and talking more about how it is that those facilities can be shared with the people in the towns. And I think that's something that we should not let go by when we have our discussions with the school folks. And the only other one, the Historic Commission, which I was there last week. They happened to meet this afternoon here at 4:30, and I didn't go. But the CPC applications that are in, they have 7 that they are going to have to opine on for the CPC, and that includes the Veterans Park, the Northwest Schoolhouse, which is the Oddfellows Hall, the old firehouse, French Cable Station, Snow Library, Federated Church, and the town bandstand. That's it.
Mark, anything?
Shellfish and Waterways Committee met this week. They were interested in where we were with the process with the fertilizer petition. So I kind of filled them in on that, where we have to file with the legislature when they come into session in January. They're also going to kind of undertake a review of Rock Harbor in terms of the policies for allocating slips for commercial and recreational boaters. Classification of the charter fleet is basically recreational as opposed to commercial. This board has had a couple of requests in the past couple of years for the ability for a captain to pass on the slip to his mate or son or grandson in order to keep the thing going. The sustainability of that is probably suspect. If we get the new commercial bulkhead done, if that comes through from the state with a grant and it gets through town meeting, the committee's kind of looking, as I said, at the notion of we need to kind of examine the whole use of that harbor and the policies and how to allocate the slips and what the cost would be and all that. So that'll be kind of a long-term project that we'll probably hear about that in the future. Nothing, not next week, but,
Right.
Down the road. So it's something that needs to get done, and they're going to start doing it.
That's great.
That's the only one.
Great. And I'm not reporting this week on the committees that I've attended. I do want to remind you guys that I'm keeping you busy next week. We have a joint meeting at 4:30 on Tuesday, December 20th with the Affordable Housing Trust. I don't know if you got that message. And keep checking back in about our start time. Right now, it looks like we're going to have an executive session at 4 o'clock to discuss real estate in town before next week. I mean, on the December 21st meeting. It might move to 4:30 right now. I think, John, we'll settle it tomorrow, but just make a note of that if you're available.
4:30 for the Affordable Housing Trust joint
On
meeting.
Tuesday.
On Tuesday.
Joint meeting, and I believe it's a one-agenda item meeting. And then 4 o'clock potentially on Wednesday. And so noted that, John, your second-to-last meeting next week is the last meeting that we get you present in any form. So with that, I'm looking for another motion.
Well, future agenda items?
Yes. Well, I was hoping you wouldn't give me any, because we're booking into February now.
Right, no, I mean, I just to mention
Yes.
again, because it's been brought up twice tonight, but I brought up twice before that we really need to get into some discussions from the select board with the OES property and meet with Orleans Elementary and.
I will fill you in where that stands.
Okay.
Not quite ready for prime time. Yes. Okay, anything else?
Madam Chair,
Yes, future items?
8:30, I move we adjourn.
Oh,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Goddess of Communications, please take us off the air.